Yeah, we still got people coming in. Hey, look, everybody, I got a camera. Um, yeah, it's kind of high res. You guys want to see something? I mean, you can see this is actually getting pretty long, but do you want to see how long my hair is getting? Check this out. I mean, it's like it's like I mean, holy crap! It's literally like down past my shoulders and stuff.
You're starting to
Um,
look like a flat earther.
yeah, I think so. I mean,
Tempting
what do you think,
crazy.
Seth? I mean, is it pretty getting pretty long? It's gonna be down past my shoulders here soon. I mean, hang on, let me
Wait,
get
so if you're
hang on.
streaming now, should I show everyone on the stream the thing again?
Okay, but anyway, so I did get a camera. It seems to be working okay. Got my bangs hanging out though. Holy crap!
Steve,
But
should
yeah,
I
I'm letting it grow down to about here.
should,
So what's that?
should I show everyone the thing again? That now that everyone's here and the stream
Yeah, sure,
started.
whatever. Yeah, I mean, this is
Alright,
a late night hangout, but I've also entitled it "Flat
alright,
Earthers Are
so
Morons." So you know,
alright, so
because you know what, flat earthers are morons.
uh, yeah. So I was doing my thing, my blog, the Motto Atheist, hashtag not sponsored by myself, and and I, on Twitter, everyone's going on about the ISS live stream on Ustream.com being apparently fake or something. So I wanted to shut these people up. I wanted to prove not beyond a shadow of a doubt, but beyond a reasonable doubt that it's very unlikely that the ISS live stream is fake. So I decided the Himawari-8 satellite takes an image of the Asian Pacific region every 10 minutes. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to wait for the ISS to go into the area, stream the ground, and then look at the clouds, and then find an image that was taken from the Himawari-8 weather satellite that was made by a completely different space agency, and compare the clouds in both images from both the ISS, which is from America, or the live stream is NASA, so it's America, and the Japanese satellite, which is Japanese, obviously, the Himawari, and then compare the clouds, and if they match up, you can tell it's very unlikely that the Japanese and American governments will be every single day matching up cloud patterns, and it worked. It absolutely worked. This was a flipped image. I had to flip it upside down from the ISS. Literally 3 minutes later, this was over Western Australia. Uh, um, the ISS, the Himawari-8 took this image here. If you look at these clouds here, and this little sharp bit, this hole, and this little dash here, and this little sharp part, it's exactly where it should be. Just looking at it from a different angle. And if you see this big L gap in the clouds, big L gap in the cloud, like backwards L. And then there's you see this little face down here. It's a bit at an angle, so it would look differently. And then this little cloud of a hole. It's exactly the same here. Face, a little cloud of a hole. Same. Exactly.
All you've done is prove that the conspiracy goes deeper than we previously
Illuminati
thought.
That's what I'm
confirmed.
thinking. I mean, I don't know how much they're paying you to say this because you're obviously an Illuminati shell.
Obviously.
Look. Calster, I mean, that's not an L, that's a compass. Illuminati confirmed.
Obviously, yeah. I mean, it's. I'm just saying that the conspiracy would have to be very, very tricky. Every single day, it's kind of Occam's razor. I mean.
No, they literally think that somebody's sitting there, and every 10 minutes they're making this picture that's supposed to be the Himawari satellite, and yet it's one of the pictures you can actually zoom in. It's like a vector graph, right? You have those vector pictures where you can actually zoom in on them. Portable graphics that are such that you don't lose resolution when you move closer. Well, same thing with these Himawari-8 satellites. You can go pretty damn close to damn near the surface, and you still have pretty good resolution without having pixelization. So there's no way somebody's actually generating those. It's just not possible.
No, you can't.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt you. I mean, it's pretty cool and stuff. But I just wanted to say hi to Steve, my favorite neckbeard cuck. How are you doing, buddy?
What neckbeard? What are you talking about? I shaved it all.
You're such a beta male.
I know. I am a beta. Oh god, that guy was funny as shit though. I gotta admit, I was like, don't break the rules because I really don't want to kick you because I'm actually enjoying this because that guy was just dumb as shit. He came into the hangout earlier, and we were having a pretty decent discussion, and he just kind of charged in like a creationist would do, right? Well, I'm here to talk about this. Okay, great. He had nothing to add to the conversation, literally nothing. He was a fruit on the ground atheist if I've ever seen one. And that's a
So-
shame, you know, because I mean, I think atheists have pretty good arguments. He didn't.
I was listening to it, and
Oh, you saw?
well, I mean, I was out in the field all day, and I just got back probably an hour ago, and I saw that you had the hangout. I'm like, oh man! So I kind of like looked at it. I'm like, 5 hours. Fuck this. So I kind of jumped the spot in the middle and saw Ozzy talking. I'm like,
Most
okay,
people do
good.
that, right?
You know, like they got Ozzy in there. So I mean, like I'm sure he's going to kind of like set this straight because even if you don't agree with him, like he's going to present this in a really clear, concise manner. And I was listening to him like discuss it with MP, and I'm like,
Oh
oh
God.
man, like what, like this, like MP's a smart guy. I like him. Why isn't he getting this?
Did
Like,
you leave the comment? Did
I
you see
have
the
to kind of check.
comment that MP left on the video?
No.
I said the same thing. I was like, MP, I get really a little upset when a friend of mine is this dense. I was like, I'm trying to explain to him what like a disjunctive elimination is, right? P or Q, not P, therefore Q, because you eliminate one, the other one has to be true. And I'm trying to explain to him that look, when we're saying we're rejecting the claim, we're eliminating that. If somebody says, I claim this to be true, and you say, you know what, your truth claim is wrong, I'm rejecting your truth claim, I'm negating it, it's wrong, right? Then the only other option is the other part of the disjunction. So if you don't accept theism, you're saying theism is wrong. The truth value assigned to that is wrong. The only other thing, if you evaluate that proposition, is that the false value, which is atheism. That's where he's having the disconnect. He's thinking that if you disbelieve somebody and you say, look, I don't believe what you're saying, then why are you taking the other claim? Because that's true. You can't do that. You can't say I disbelieve X, therefore Y. You can't do that. But in a disjunction, in a disjunctive syllogism, that's exactly how it works. You eliminate one of the disjuncts, you have the other one. I told him, you know what? You're really, the penny's not dropping for you, very similarly to the way it was not dropping for Matt Slick. And I showed him using logic and all this other stuff. And you know what he actually responded? He started talking about knowledge and definitions again.
Yeah, which was a point that was brought up in the hangout there, and I watched about a half hour of it, and it was just getting, it got to the point where it was just like you have like all these arguments, kind of showing. I guess the problem is that, and I bring this up every single time, is we're not saying you're wrong, okay? That when you use a definition of atheism like lack of belief, yes, you're right. Atheism's fall into the category of things that lack belief. But there's a lot of things out there, and I brought this up again, like in one of the comment sections where it was just like, if someone asks you, what kind of pet do you have, and you say, a quadruped. Oh, okay, great. Like you have a quadruped. What the hell does that mean? Like you have a cow, a horse, a dog, a cat, a mouse. Like, what kind of pet do you have? It's like, well, I have a cat. It's like, okay, so you own a cat. It's like, no. Well, I own a quadruped. And then every single person after that, where it's just like they try to force it on everybody else. But now what they're doing is we already have this word that kind of describes four-legged animals, but now they want to use cat to describe all four-legged animals instead. So, or some things like a cat. So what kind of animal? What kind of animal do you have? Well, it's like a cat. It's like, oh, okay. Well, what is it? It's like, well, it's a dog. It's got four legs. It's a quadruped. Well, okay. Why are we playing around with these words? We had perfectly sufficient words to describe these things, and now you're trying to turn this word that described a specific position and turn it into this umbrella thing that doesn't really fit anymore, and it doesn't really make sense.
Well, one of the other persons left a comment on that video, and he sent me over to another channel that had a video, and the video was pretty well done as far as production value. Got a little intro from Aaron Raw, and then he makes some really crucial mistakes because he says he says atheism, and he has two boxes, and the first box says God does not exist, and underneath it says lacks a belief in God, and he only checks the bottom one. And I'm thinking to myself, this guy doesn't understand. Yes, atheism is a lack of belief, but it's also a belief God does not exist.
Yeah,
it's just a lack of belief. People always go, "Oh, atheists believe there isn't a God." It's like,
yeah, they do. We're talking about philosophical atheism, And this is the problem.
Oh,
That,
okay.
and we're having a late night hangout, so a lot of people didn't watch the one earlier, so we might as well continue a little bit because we got Sokka here and Seth here. But
Mic check.
it works. So, Cal, in philosophical atheism, the way atheism is defined is a person who believes God does not exist. It is a positive claim. It's an affirmation of the existence, a non-existence of God. It's an ontological claim. Now, in YouTube, a lot of people are trying to push this lack of belief position, which, by the way, it is a lack of belief, but so is agnosticism, so is itheism, so is theological and cognitivist. I mean, you pick it. Any one of the non-theist positions.
Any position that's a non-theistic position.
Yeah. So if I ask you, what position do you hold? Do you believe in God, Cal? And you say, well, I lack a belief. You're not telling me what you believe. You're not telling me any part. You're not saying what non-theist position you have. I don't know if you're an atheist. I don't know if you're an apatheist. I have no idea. And
No, I'm more
that
of a sort of de facto sort of. I don't believe in a God, but it's like I can't be sure that there isn't a God, but I live my life on the assumption that he or she or it is not there.
Right, but these are not knowledge claims. This is where MP makes a mistake. I didn't say the word knowledge to MP at all on the comments. He kept bringing up knowledge. We're not talking about an epistemic certainty. We're not talking about anything but a dostastic claim that you're making, that what you think the reality is. That's it. And we have, as Sokka pointed out, we have words that already mean these things. Theist, not theist. Not theist is equal to non-theism. That's what it means. So non-theism is anybody who's not a theist. And under non-theism, we have all these other different sub-branches, like atheism and agnosticism. I don't know why, anyways, long story short, this video that I had watched was called Why Christians Don't Understand the Definition of Atheism. And it really should have been entitled Why Atheists Don't Understand the Definition of Atheism. Or how it's at least used philosophically speaking. Because when you say that, when you have two check marks and you say atheism is not a belief God does not exist, that doesn't fly, because it really is. You're believing God does not exist.
Yeah.
But
I don't really have any. But
There's a common 4chan meme. You start off a thread with the question, why can't atheists define atheism? Trolling post, but
why can't atheists rule what?
But it why can't atheists define atheism?
Oh.
It kind of trolls this point, right? That there are some atheists that claim that atheism is a mere lack of belief in God, while other atheists and some theists and philosophers in general claim that atheism is the claim that God is not.
They're both right? I mean, both groups are correct. Their definitions are not wrong. It's just, as we keep saying, one is less better than the other. One is more sufficient than the other. But these atheists are so militant that they don't get this. They're just... And I might make a video about this other guy. Like I said, he got like 53,000 views on it, and he only has 2,000 subs. I'm pretty impressed. Like I said, pretty good reduction value, but just flawed philosophically speaking. Because he's saying literally that atheists have no burden of justification. Atheists are just somebody who just doesn't have a belief. And that's really naive, I think. But anyways, we got Bernie here. Bernie got pretty spun earlier. Did he want to join in because he wasn't able to articulate his rebuttal to something in the Great Debate community earlier? I guess not. Anyways, we got RJ. Hey, RJ. Okay, we got EO.
Oh, hold on.
Hey, Steve.
Here we go.
Hey, I wasn't able to attend the Sci Strike thing last night. He has them so late, and I'm usually crashed out by this time.
Yeah, I'm a vampire, so I have no problem with time zones.
Yeah, I used to be, but actually, in the last this whole month, actually, I've been kind of getting up at like 6 a.m. So I've been going to bed relatively early.
I mean, since
The kind of questions that you're getting here, atheism, that I get all the time as the atheist guy at the Spokane Faith and Values, and I have to keep on repeating to people, it depends on how you define it. The historical atheist is somebody who doesn't believe the correct God. So that's how Socrates gets labeled an atheist. That's how Thomas Jefferson gets labeled an atheist. An ontological atheist, capital A atheist, is one that is the none of the above version, and everybody starts out. Some of us are just more rigorous in applying the rules, so we end up a capital A atheist.
Yeah, I don't differentiate
And then
between the
some
whole
people get
capital.
labeled as an A plus.
Yeah, I don't. To me, a capitalization doesn't change the word.
That-
The only time that actually changes the word.
But even to the point, like even
Yeah.
Christians were, because they
Yeah,
didn't believe the
'cause
right God was the same definition.
And
Yeah,
refused
but
to
isn't it kind
worship
of
the emperor. That was what tended to get them into trouble
isn't it
more
kind
than
of-
anything else. The Romans could care less what gods you worship, so long as you made a point of following the emperor.
But isn't it kind of odd
step
that
on the wrong turf that way?
that-
By the way, the Christians at the time became the official religion. Apparently, were only about 10% of the Roman population, so they were a minority one that got boosted into a higher niche by virtue of having an emperor on your side.
Isn't it kind of weird though that atheists, yes, there's like two groups.
Well-
right?
Well, I mean,
But-
that was quite common for a while, because you find this even within
is my mic not
going
working?
into the anything beyond like the 10th century, that people became the religion of whatever their leader was.
Can you hear me? Is
You know,
my
that
mic working?
all of a sudden your king became, or your fight for war became whatever sect of Christianity, and then all of a sudden anybody underneath of him, followed suit.
Can you guys hear me?
Although that is a little more
Can
the
you guys hear me?
modality of the God of Abraham bunch. They tended to be exclusivist religions. And you find a little bit of it that in the early stages of the Ashoka regime in India, that was the first Buddhist state, where they wanted
Can you
everybody to
hear
be
me?
Buddhist no matter what. But that's a less likely thing to
Even in Japan, it was common there with the introduction of Christianity during the time when they were doing the trade with the Portuguese.
Oh,
certain,
yeah,
feudal
they were very
lords would.
pushy about
I
that.
take it you.
Yeah.
And there
I take it you
was
couldn't
actually
hear
a
me, right?
pushback. Shinto became the official Japanese religion. Is partly a political pushback against Christianity.
Can I get a mic check? Mic
You're
check?
fine.
Yeah, you sound
Oh,
good.
okay, God, I've been talking for the last 5 minutes. But in the outside
Your
chat, they're
your
like, yeah, they
your
can't hear you.
video's a bit choppy,
Is it?
and James there, his audio to video is way out of sync.
Well, I think we had a phone quake.
Yeah.
No, it's
Okay, well,
Well, they can.
frankly, I find it a little bit ridiculous to say that a word literally meaning without God or gods is unable to mean just a simple lack of belief. But that's
Well,
your
that's not what we're
interpretation, I guess.
that's not really what we're saying. I think you're missing the big picture here. There's two ways that people are claiming what atheism really means. There's a broad definition and there's a narrow definition. The broad definition is basically a lack of belief, which is the non-theist position. Any non-theist lacks a belief. They're trying to take the word non-theist and to substitute the word atheist for it. That's what they're trying to do. It's for political reasons. Okay?
For the same reason, go back to the other example. A quadruped, by the most broadest a cat by the most broadest definition, can be described as a quadruped. But does that really define a cat?
Right. So that's what they're trying to do. Now, the narrow definition, the one that's historically, the one that's always been academically and philosophy, and unanimously, if you go to any college, is what the term is going to mean, is someone who believes God does not exist. Somebody who's a positive affirmation that says, I believe there is no God or gods. That's what it literally means in academia. Now, if somebody doesn't accept that, that's fine. No big deal. But it doesn't change the fundamental facts that just by saying you lack a belief is an insufficient answer to the question about God's existence, his ontology. It doesn't satisfy the requirements to actually discharge the answering of that question properly. If I say Kauser, what do you want for dinner? And you say I don't want chicken. You're not telling me what you want for dinner. And if I say, do you believe in God? And you say, well, I don't believe. Well, I'm not asking you what you don't believe. I'm asking you what you do believe. And so when people say this lack of belief, they're really
I believe in
being evasive.
the flying spaghetti monster, but that's something
and
completely
that's a belief claim, right? But
Yeah, it is.
so it's which definition is more sufficient? That's all. That's all we're saying. When an atheist goes into a discussion with a theist, like we got Veckel here. Hey Veckel, if I got a discussion with you and we're saying, oh, okay, let's decide whether God exists or not, ontologically speaking, because these are all knowledge claims and just to his existence. But and you say, hey, okay. Hey Steve, why are you? This hypothetically says an atheist. You say, Steve, why am I an atheist? And I say, well, you know what? I don't have to tell you why I'm an atheist. You're a theist. You need to tell me why you're a theist and give me all the evidence why you're a theist. Would you think that's fair, Veckel?
Don't presume.
Where did Veckel go?
The thing that bothers me most is when people say, do you believe in God? I say, which God did you have in mind? That most people presume that it's the version of God that they have. It's the capital G ontological Aristotelian God, but that's not the only player on the block.
No, but when
so
you
the
say
moment
God
you
or
buy
gods,
into that assumption,
no, when you say you believe in God, you literally are talking about a metaphysical God. You're not talking about what they call as a naturalistic God. G-Man's argument is that, and it's absurdly wrong. But we're not talking about, if somebody believes the son's a God, okay, great. But it's not. It's not a theistic position. That is a natural God, as they would refer to it as. But we're asking you, do you believe in an entity? Do you believe in a being, a deity, a sovereign entity? That's what we're asking when you say, do you believe in God? Now, people can play these little word games of like, which God do you mean? I don't think that really gets anywhere. I really don't. It's any God. Pick one. It doesn't matter. You could be a deist, but do you believe in a God?
But the very act of asking the question, do you believe in God singular, as opposed to do you believe in gods with a parentheses S in there, that's a more general. The moment you dive into the, you're limiting yourself.
Okay, I think I'm gonna have this is lagging really bad for me, and I'm sorry about.
You might have to refresh.
But
you might have to refresh. But when we say God, we typically know it means God or gods. Now, the thing is, RJ, we've talked about these things so much, we just abbreviate anymore. I don't have to sit there every time and say, do you believe in a God or gods? It's just basically, do you believe in God? We all know that the plurality is included in the question, I think. I mean, I could be wrong on that, but generally speaking, wouldn't you guys agree it's kind of included?
The average Christian that I bumped into, when they are talking about it, they are assuming that it is their particular version of God that is the only player on the field. Whereas if you were asking this question to Plato mucked it up because he would use God in a singular sense when he actually means the Olympian gods, and he would just use it as a shorthand. But he was still talking about Zeus and Athena and all the rest, not a Unitarian God or a God of Abraham Trinity, or a God of Abraham, of Jesus Christ, however you want to look at it.
Let me ask, it's Veckel. Veckel, your mic working?
I bristle at letting an assumption on the field that we don't need to let on the field.
Well, how else would you rather phrase the question? And your video and your mic, your video and your audio are so out of sync.
You can easily believe that there's some theoretical supernatural entity about atheism in relation to any possible entity as a generic. And once you establish that as the playing field, that's fine. Anybody can play on that.
Somebody's playing guitar. Don't play guitar. Who's playing the guitar?
Buddy.
Who is it?
Nor do I have a
Yeah, don't play any guitars because it can actually trigger a
Guys, it's not me. It's not me.
Who was?
Yeah, I don't. I lack a belief.
God
in who it
is playing guitar and wants to come in, and we mind.
But you want to do a mic check, Veckel? He's just
can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, now I can hear you.
Yeah, watch out. I don't know who this other Veckel is, but it's definitely not me.
You as a ghost. You had left and come back. I think it's just ghosting. Isn't it?
I didn't leave.
Well, the one of the Veckels has a slightly lighter background.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah,
well,
that's me. Yeah.
Okay.
1 second here.
Yeah.
All right. The Veckel account, the dark background says present to everyone and muted. The Veckel who was talking has presented everyone profile and muted. So who is the other Veckel then?
Who's
It's a
the one?
ghost.
No idea.
No,
Alright,
it's not
so-
a ghost.
Okay.
right.
Well, hang on.
I'm gonna leave and then I'll try to come back.
Perhaps he's a
Okay, I'm
future
gonna leave and I'll-
Veckel coming back in his time
No,
machine.
no, no, James, don't go
Shit.
confusing us, please.
It's from the future. I saw the future. All of you become Christians.
Oh no, that's terrible.
We're already elect. It doesn't matter.
All right. I'll be right back.
Yeah, there's two Veckel joins in the outside in the side part here.
Yeah.
So who is this other Veckel?
I thought it was. I thought
One's
he-
gone.
Because to have an account that does not have a profile on it means you had to have deleted the G plus side. And that's how you get an account like this, the same way Epi did. So
Well, I
who
mean,
are you, the other Veckel?
Veckel does have some trolls that use his name, but it's weird that
Yeah.
Veckel would come in at the same time as the troll. I've never had that happen before. So, all right, Veckel, do you want me to just
Yeah.
remove the other one?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter; they can't snipe. But
Just remove that guy.
okay, so
Whoever
you
that is.
you have the lighter gray background, right?
Yep, that's
Yeah,
me.
All right. Did I get the right one?
he got the one.
Yeah, you
All
did.
right, all right, just making sure, So, anyways, did you
Yes,
hear what I
he's
was saying?
colorblind. He can't tell the difference.
Yeah, seriously, right? Did you hear what I was saying earlier, Veckel, about if we had a conversation?
Yeah, could you repeat the question you asked
Sure.
me before?
If we let's assume I was an atheist and we had a conversation, and the question was asked to us, do you believe in God? And I just say, hey, you know what? I lack a belief. And you say, well, why do why are you an atheist, Steve? And I say, well, I lack a belief. Well, why? Well, that's it. That's my burden. I'm done. But now you're a theist, Veckel. So you know what? You got to tell me all the evidence why you're a theist, and you do all the work, and I just sit there and have to do nothing. Is that fair for an atheist to do that?
No, not at all.
And that's why
I don't think so.
Well, it isn't. It isn't fair, and that's why when a atheist just pulls this, oh, I only lack a belief, and try to avoid their justificatory burden, they're just being dishonest. It's simple as that. Most of the time, not all the time. There are some people that just don't understand it, but I think a lot of people don't want to make a claim, and they want the theist to prove their position because they think it's a science thing. They think it's this person is making a claim, and of course the person who's making the claim has a positive evidence, right? The burden to provide positive evidence. But an atheist is making a claim too. They're making a claim that God does not exist, and no matter how you slice it, that's the way it is in philosophy. And I think that's Saka. Don't you agree? It's kind of the whole point we're trying to get across to people.
Yeah, trying to.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, if people don't want to accept that, that's fine. But I think it makes them look really weak, and I think theists do pick up on that, and I think they do have a right to call them out for that.
Yeah,
But just saying-
when I'm in these kinds of conversations with certain individuals, I don't give them a problem if they're stating something from my view, it seems subjective. So, I that's what they believe, that's what they think. So I can't really argue with that. I mean, I can ask them some questions, but that's about it. But once they make a positive claim, then I think, the onus is definitely on whoever's making the claim.
Well, in conversation, both of them. Both people have an onus.
Anyone who's making an affirmation of something, I think, has some sort of obligation.
Well, even if I don't accept your position, right? If you say you're a theist, and I'm like, well, I don't accept theism, you have a right to say, well, why don't you accept it?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So you can have a conversation like that, right?
But to me, I can see. I don't know if I would still view it as obligatory on a person who says I don't accept it. I would just simply say, well, okay, fine, that's your position. If they want to further I see what you're saying. I never really looked at it that way, but I mean, if a person is just going to stop and say, well, I don't accept your position, I guess you're right. I could ask them, well, why don't you accept it?
Yeah, I think they have. I think they have a small onus to tell you what. For example, okay, Veckel, are you actually in the Great Debate Community Forum? I don't remember if you've ever joined or not.
I don't think I am.
Well, you should. But one of the polls they put in there was a discussion I had with somebody, and for several hours I've given evidence to why atheists do have a burden of justification. No matter what definition you believe, they have a burden of justification. And he kept on saying I didn't meet my burden, and I'm like, how did I not meet my burden? I had logical arguments, I used references, I used citations, I used rational explanations. That means I met my burden. It doesn't mean whether you accept my claim or not. It just means that I met my burden to why I believe this to be true, right? And I had put a poll in the Great Debate community, and I think it's like a 93% agree with 30 plus votes, but they get confused here. They think that a burden of justification means that you have to prove to them your claim is true. That's not what it means.
Just a question. Do we know whether or not there's a breakdown of people between, say, Christians using that kind of an argument versus Hindus, or is it essentially everybody is coming from a relatively limited religious frame, so we don't really know how a Vishnu arguer would do?
I don't have a sample size for that. I can tell
What
you
do
with
you
most
mean?
pagans. Well, I think he's saying, do they kind of use the same kind of tactics to say that, an atheist, do they think an atheist has a burden of justification or not? Is that what you're asking, RJ?
Is this a uniquely Western tradition? I haven't seen an enormous amount of apologetics from
every pagan I've ever met
or other religious perspectives, but I don't think the Kalam argument and things like that seem to be showing up particularly outside of the God of Abraham frame.
Yeah, no, I think that every pagan I ever met agrees that atheism or atheists have a burden. Yeah. And the Kalam, I think, is dead except for Matt Bell. Matt Bell is the only person that really throws around the Kalam, and he has, I think, like 240 versions of it now. How many, Saka?
Well, William Lane Craig, but remember, they're very popular in the culture camp. So the mere inadequacy of an argument isn't a measure of how popular it is for people who insist on repeating it.
William Lane Craig's not in our community, and Matt Bell is basically a William Lane Craig ball washer. So whatever William Lane Craig says, Matt Bell will agree with. Doesn't matter. He's so far up his ass.
The master of the circular argument.
Well, William Lane Craig is a debater. That's all he's always does. He doesn't really. It doesn't matter to him, I think, that if he's saying something that's true or not. He just wants to win the debate. That's it.
I think he wants to believe that he believes what he's saying is true. I do. Any doubt of that.
I mean, I'm not saying I shouldn't say that he doesn't want to, but I think he'll do anything to win the debate. He really is all about the debate.
His worst argument.
Well, yeah, that's the debater's tradition. Yes, the jujitsu thing, and find a way of getting a gotcha. But that's a different matter than conviction. That's just tactics.
Wayne, what was William Lane Craig's worst argument?
His worst argument goes like, if moral objective values exist, then that means God exists, or something like that. And so, like he says, if right and wrong exist, then that must mean that there's a God. And I don't know how he could ever come to that conclusion. I think that's a really bad argument.
He uses the same argument reverse. He argues that we know an absolute morality exists because of God. So he uses God to prove the morality and the morality to prove God. And on that little circular Mobius strip, boy, there's no on or off ramp.
And by the way, in the live chat, can you guys be a little lighter on the spam on the timeouts? People watch my hangout. If you guys can't really determine which is trolling, ask me. But I don't think Luigi's trolling. He's been around a long time. He actually, I think, he does believe this stuff. But let him run a little bit. I mean, you got to be a little bit less banhammery and timeout, because this is supposed to be open stuff, right? We want to have open conversations. We want people to be able to express themselves. But if you're not certain, let me know, and I'll kind of like guide you on that. But I don't think you need to be timing people out because they just have a different opinion, obviously. That's just silly.
Hear, hear.
Hey, Craig, is it enough justification just to say there is no evidence? That's justification?
Well, hold on a second. I mean, well, the problem with that is that just becomes an argument from ignorance.
Right. That's the whole thing.
Because like, first off, I guess before you can even really come to that position, what is the standard of evidence that you would accept? Like, do you even have a metric of evidence that could convince you of this position? To put it, I think, the other way, I kind of used this as an example before, where let's say there is a mathematician, and he puts out, this really complex formula, and asks you if you think it's true or not. And you're looking at this like, well, I have no idea. I'm not a mathematician. Like, I don't understand this. Is that enough justification there because you don't understand something, or you don't have the same type of metric that he has to deny it at that point in time? Or, would you actually have to have, a pretty good idea of what he's saying? Because at that point in time, if you have an idea of what he's saying, then you have a justification for why you would decline it or deny it at that point in time, because you understand the material that's being presented, and you know that the conclusion isn't following from that. So your justification would come from some reasoning like that, not just simply because you don't know, or you don't think that the evidence is there, or that someone's failed to convince you of it. I probably phrased that in a really weird way.
Yeah,
I could probably do it better unless that worked.
I think we kind of get where you're going. But yeah, the first thing, if you just say that there's no evidence, you do kind of run the risk of an argument from ignorance. But you can say, look at, I'm going to assume the persona of an atheist. I can say, look at, I take the atheist position because provisionally, I haven't seen any evidence that's convinced me to accept there's a deity. And until I see enough evidence to convince me to have that position, that a deity exists, I will provisionally maintain that a deity doesn't exist.
The HT will.
But that's a provisional thing, right? But it's not an argument for ignorance. If you're just saying provisionally, I don't believe a deity exists. I haven't seen any evidence for one. But again, you still kind of do run the risk of an argument for ignorance, because you're basically saying I'm accepting X because it hasn't been shown that to be wrong.
Some religions spill over into the objectively empirical. We don't have to guess that you don't need to worship Quetzalcoatl to make the sun rise or rip people's hearts out. That practice stop, sun continue to rise, Quetzalcoatl off the table. Similarly, the failure of Jesus Christ to return for the Parousia, that's failed prediction. So you can use the same kind of logic you'd use against Nostradamus prophecies in that context, and you don't have to worry about a lack of evidence.
Yeah.
You're looking at the failure of a predicted event to happen.
No, I agree.
Right, and that's a completely different point, though. I mean, that's not a lack of
evidence
at that point in time. That is for people that say that you can't prove a negative. You can, if you can show that the impossibility of it exists, or that there's an inherent contradiction within the things that it says. So this is one of the things that happens with people that argue for literal interpretation of the Bible with things like young Earth, where if that becomes the foundation for a belief in God, where your God exists because your God exists, the Earth is young. Well, any type of demonstration at that point in time that the Earth is not young would therefore also negate the claim that God exists, or at least the God in the concept that's being described as.
Or even, more interestingly, Christianity. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Seth. You haven't said much.
Almost all Protestant Christians, and maybe even Catholics, I'm not really sure, would say that the God they worship is a God that's known by all men. So if you can show that there are people that sincerely disbelieve in God, that would be an argument against it.
Yeah, no, and again, there's a lot of arguments an atheist can use to even, like I said, just do a proper discharge of the justificatory burden. But I think some of the better arguments are like divine hiddenness. I think the problem of evil, the moral monster, those kind of things are pretty decent. I mean, failed predictions could be another one. I don't know enough about the predictions to actually run that one, but if somebody has those kind of arguments, then yeah, that's all they got to say. That's why I'm an atheist. Okay, great. You met your burden. You're done. But if you want to make your claim, you want to actually show somebody that theism is wrong, then you have a lot more work to do. That's a whole different ballgame then. You're talking about the claim itself, rather than are you justified to believe the claim yourself.
Well, HT will agree with Socken the mathematical example. Sometimes there are arguments from incredulity or whatever. But how about if somebody gives you that old example of, I have an invisible dragon in my basement? Isn't the argument from incredulity valid in that? That example,
it's an argument from incredulity, But
There you go.
Yeah, but when you're making a positive scientific claim, you're not evaluating a theological proposition, right? That's not a philosophical claim. That's a scientific claim. We're not talking about the ontological nature of God. We're talking about, okay, I have a scientific claim here that you can test. Now you're probably a supernatural claim because it's an invisible, whatever the fuck you want to put it there, unicorn. But yeah, that in that particular case, you're not really dealing with a question that's asked of both people, like it is with this God's existence. You're a single person making a claim against the paradigm, the status quo kind of thing. And in science, the way that works is you singly have the onus to do that. If you want to falsify the theory of evolution, you have the onus to do that. Nobody else has to show you that evolution works. They don't have to do a damn thing. All you've got to do is falsify it, right? Because you have the onus. You're making the claim.
The example of the dragon, the invisible dragon, or the pink elephant, or whatever, any of those arguments those are generally presented as reductio ad absurdums to demonstrate the claims of a theist, where they might be vacuous or just beg the question or whatever. There's a lot of reasons why people might use argumentation like that. It's not because they actually obviously believe that. It's because they're trying to do a reductio of an opposite position.
Sure.
So it wouldn't be an argument from incredulity for that sense.
Yeah, no, and I
was presenting it as a reductio.
What it would be called. It's not an argument from incredulity. Argument from incredulity is just like, I don't believe you. Why don't you believe me? Because I don't believe you. Your argument's wrong because I don't believe you.
Here's a question to toss out from the premise: are all gods real? Unless you're arguing that all gods are real, then some gods are not real. How do you decide that any god is not real, and let the ball roll from there and see how far it can go before they have to start digging their heels on a particular one? How about that?
The problem with that is that it's a waste of conversation time, because most of the time when atheists have a conversation with theists over the existence of a god, you already agree on 99.9% of them. There's no point to engage. Like, if me and Slim Jim are going to have a discussion over God, we don't need to first off collectively rule out Zeus or Hades or those ones.
That's a methodological question.
No, we don't need to, because none of us are putting that out, that claim forward. So both of us are going to agree on just about everything.
You got a billion Vishnu believers.
But RJ,
you're right.
We were talking about two people. If they both agree that both of them don't believe in a specific deity, then you're done at that point. You can move on to talk about what they have a disagreement on. Like Sokka said, it's a complete waste of time for two people that have already established they don't believe in Vishnu. They're having the conversation.
Why do they disbelieve in Vishnu but believe in their particular god?
Well, he's showing them they have a criteria for disbelieving in God, and he's going to hold them to that criteria. I think that's useful.
Well, apply it universally.
Well, it depends. It depends.
To an outsider test for faith.
Right, but it depends too, because, for example, if you come to a position like, I'm not sure if Alex is still in the room here. He's gone now. But if you talk to somebody who might come from the school of Reformed Apologetics, like presuppositionalism, their disbelief in other gods is a conclusion based on the fact that they've already concluded that their God is real. They don't have any other justificatory factor for ruling out any other gods than that they already know that their God is real and their God has said that all other gods are false. So that alone would be their justification for that.
Yeah.
Now you might rule them out because you have your own different reasons, because you think that no gods are possible, or all gods, the concepts of gods are vacuous, or whatever. They might not come to the same they might not have the same reasons for rejecting that God, but at least you've come to the same conclusion. So the point at that time would only be to argue over what would be the necessary criteria to rule out a God. And for them, the necessary criteria to rule out a God would be because their God says that God's not real. Well, in which case, you'd have to automatically take the conversation back to, well, how do you know your God's real first off, before you could even address any of the other God claims? And you're back at the square one where
Yeah,
we're talking about their God belief.
that's a brilliant way of putting it, Sokka. Because did you catch that, RJ? I mean, you following what Sokka's saying on that? Because
Oh
look,
yeah, yeah.
if I say if I put on the
position,
mantle of a Christian and say, hey,
you'll-
Yahweh has told me no other God exists, and I accept Yahweh exists, and I'll give you the reasons why I accept Yahweh, and I don't have to then therefore explain why the other gods don't exist because I just did. My God has told me they don't exist. Okay, now why do you believe that God? So like you said, we're back at square one again.
Well, there was a pretty good document. I probably should just I'm talking. Okay, there was a pretty good document on Rational Wiki where they listed every single god that Christians don't believe in, and then every single god that atheists don't believe in. And it's like I show my screen. Like fuck me now. I'll show it now. Wasn't there? All right. So like so these are the
Here
ones
comes
that
the
atheists don't
comments.
believe in. No. Yeah. Gods that atheists don't believe in and gods that Christians don't believe in. And it's like, for goodness sake.
There's a lot of deities.
There are a lot of deities. I mean, who's to say that? Because someone might say, okay, Mars, Maru. Like, for example, someone might say, oh, Yahweh has told me that all the other gods in Maru are fake. But then someone else might say, Maru told me that Yahweh and all the other gods are fake.
Right,
So,
but then you have to say, why do you believe in Maru, though?
Yeah, just
but you might have a god. You might have a god that like Zeus will say, "Oh, well, yeah, Zeus has told me other gods exist. He's got Mars, and he's got Aphrodite, and he's got Hera, and all these other pantheonic type gods. So certain gods may not tell you that other gods don't exist. But I think it's kind of just pointless to actually go down the
Christianity.
I like how it
evolved over
includes
time.
the Emperor of Mankind.
The Emperor of Mankind. Does it have true empiricism on that list? Just a curiosity.
No.
Did you guys like
Judaism? Didn't start out with a absolutely one God only approach. He was starting out as the big kid, and your gods might exist, but they can't beat my God. And only gradually over time did it turn into, not only is it just the one God who's super powerful, all the other gods are imaginary, some of which got folded into archangels and some of the little miscellaneous characters knocking around in Genesis. And that's because it was cobbled together. Then you have this weird mutation with Christianity that then creates a triune God, which would have been just horrifying to people in the Old Testament times.
Well, I mean, this is a point that I'd want to be fair to the Christians in the room on this, is that there are a lot of people that would say that when the concept of Yahweh was first kind of conceived by the ancient Hebrewites, whatever, that he was a tribal god and that existed among a time that existed on a time when there was an acceptance that multiple gods did exist, and that over time that shaped into a monotheistic religion. That denied that any of these other gods did exist. Now, there could be some historical support for that. So, I mean, if you want to ask that question to the theists in the room, how do they deal with that, knowing that the origin of the religion might come from previous religious beliefs that it actually did include multiple gods, and what does that mean to their beliefs nowadays? I mean, it should be a fair question for them to present it.
Just real quick,
if they're young Earth creationists, for example, they won't allow that to be true.
Just real quick, I didn't see your message until just now, Alex. By the way, yeah, of course, yeah. Brojo can come in. Are you there? Is Alex still there, or did he leave?
Alex left.
Oh, yeah, I think he left. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Before you.
Yeah.
Hey, so did you guys like the photo of Ronnie? Was that like epic or what? Come on.
You know what?
I keep hearing about it, but I haven't seen it.
I mean, you're gonna have nightmares for the rest of your life over it, or be strangely sexually attracted. I don't know which. I'm not judging, but
that's what I hear. But again, I haven't seen it. Does anyone want to show it? I don't know what it is.
I went mute on that picture right away.
So, like, I had a question about, like, the Abrahamic God, especially. I was watching a video recently from a YouTuber called Dark Matter 2525, and he talked about how it's fine. He said, why would why would the entire Bible only take place in the Middle East and not any other countries? Why would it was like, so there were like these 7 continents with billions of people on every single, like the Incas of South America, and yet like I think it was one of the books that mentioned India and Nigeria, but that was, I mean, I think that was it. But other than that, it's just all in the Middle East, and it's like, wouldn't only man-made gods? So wouldn't geography only affect man-made gods of how the religion spread? It just sounded like it came from this small area from the Middle East, like all the other religions. It just came from areas, and they were just limited to that area.
There's
Well,
a
I mean,
biogeography of
you
religion.
need to understand with context there that the there are some views of the Bible that it's not necessarily a history book of the entire world. What it is, it's a history of the chosen people of God. That's what it is. So it's like, why would you need to include all the other the people in the world when this book specifically is the history of this region and these of God's chosen people there? There's really no need to mention anybody else if that's what the topic is, right?
Yeah, I
Of course,
suppose,
if
but
that would help,
if you're
but it
gonna
isn't.
write, if you're gonna spend the time writing a book, you're not gonna put all your eggs in one basket. You got to save something for the sequel.
Yeah, yeah. The Bible too, Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah.
You know?
But the Book of Mormon is, you know, it's
Exactly.
Pretty much, yeah.
it is the book of
footnotes.
Personally, I prefer Bible to Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah. But that was just the working title there, Sokka.
It sounds too much like Weird Al's Gandhi too.
Electric Boogaloo.
Well,
Yeah,
that's a
the
good
Bible
point.
would have a much better case if they had their history straight, but a lot of it was just cribbed because they didn't get around much. Most of what you find in Genesis is stuff they borrowed from the Babylonians, specifically when they were in the Babylonian captivity. That's where the Genesis creation days come from. That's the flood story. There's the Tower of Babel. All of that material got folded in, and then that became petrified as the Old Testament.
See, actually, you should have a debate more like with General Han Solo. General Han Solo is a theist. He's an older, or he's a theistic evolutionist, I guess. But I mean, he's really well versed in the Bible. I think he would give you a severe run for your money.
Oh, I'm up for it.
I still want General to show us where the word shit is in the Bible.
But anyway, that's a good argument for atheism. That the Bible is just about one small localized community. However, but then you could see it the other way. Then how do, like, so you say the Bible is only about one small community, but then why did deistic ideas pop up all over the world? If that one small community wasn't communicating with communities in Africa or in China, yada yada yada, but you have religious deity ideas popping up everywhere else, then you would say, well, that's kind of
because
interesting.
humans make religion. We do it naturally.
Yeah, but why do humans make religion?
Oh, that's a wonderful biological circumstance. In part, it's because as we get older, there are neural systems that never quite shut down, and we tend to make patterns where they don't exist, and we attribute agency to things that don't actually have agency. We're also natural storytellers. We invent things about what we believe to be true and what we want to be true. So religion of all forms, none of which are avoiding being contradictory to one another, but the general idea pops up very, very naturally. And people in the cognitive science literature that starts looking into what brain systems are involved can see that. Another area that kicks in, particularly in relation to religions that have meditative practices, religious ecstasy literally hitchhikes off the brain systems that are involved in sexual arousal. So that ain't going to go away anytime.
But see, I mean, again, like I'm gonna play the devil's advocate on this. I'm not trying to be a contrarian here, but yeah, and it would, for some views would view that as the innate working of God that allows us to that's supported by the Bible that says that we know God exists, because we can even track this down to neural functions of our brain that operate in such a way that let us know that gods exist. So just even to point that out, could support some, in a sense, some biblical stories about the Christian God and why we know he exists in under their definition of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting that would be a kind of an argument to be fun to see more theists try. But in fact, theists avoid like the plague neuroscience data. And I think because some of them may realize that that is not a place that's going to look very plausible if they start looking at it too closely. So they'd much rather stick to philosophical positions. Because you still can't explain why particular gods exist, or you can't defend particular gods other than just the squishy idea that there's some sort of supernatural agency. Why not Vishnu?
Well,
yeah, I'm not saying.
I don't think that's true. I've heard Matt Bell in particular is keen to point out that some neurological and psychological studies point out the fact that a theory of mind is much like it shows that people, at least at a young age, are prone to teleological thinking, which is similar, or what they'll say is the same as belief that a God exists and created the universe.
Yeah, the God portion of the brain, right? The portion
and that atheists grow up to suppress this belief.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one I'd love to see him try to defend on the neurobiology front. Apparently, a lot of things that make us so uniquely human are not unique to those systems. There is no dedicated system in the brain that does God thinking. There is no dedicated system that does moral reasoning. We co-opt systems that came about from a variety of different factors. One of the things that we use for self-deception, and religion plays a part in that element, has to do with the brain systems that originally developed in primates as social cohesion and conflict resolution. And those brain systems we keep on using, and it gets us into trouble.
Okay,
so religion has a lot of different roots to it, neurobiologically.
You say we use pattern recognition and the brain, just whatever we want to believe, we could believe. Now, why don't people believe in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny? The problem with this neurology stuff is that you pick and choose. You're going to come up with some excuse like, oh, well, we don't believe in Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny because of this, and this. But yet our brains are arranged so that we have to believe in deity. In other words, you guys are nitpicking your evidence always to follow your way of thinking.
I'm not claiming the brain requires you to believe in deity. The brain generates supernatural explanations fairly easily. We tend to be superstitious. We tend to see patterns. It's what you find people having. There's a wonderful book by Bruce Hood that can explain all of this much better than I can, Super Sense. And he goes into a great deal of details on the experiments and the neurobiology of it. And it's relatively accessible. Most public libraries probably have it.
Okay, but the problem becomes we're very superstitious and we could believe things, yada, yada. Why don't we keep our belief in Santa Claus, in the Easter Bunny, yada, 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 but we do keep our belief in deity?
Well, which
I
deity?
believe in yada, yada, yada.
Whatever deity you believe in.
Santa's not real?
On Earth don't believe.
Yada, yada, yada is real.
Yeah, Santa's real, too. I've seen Santa. He's been at the mall before. I know he exists. As you get older, people actually tell you, there's no such thing as Santa or whatever, and you can actually go research why the myth of Santa came from. Saint Nick, and you see the pagan traditions of Christmas. And you just say to yourself, yeah, this has never been taken as a real story. Nobody's actually believes Santa's a real thing, unless you're really not all quite there, obviously. But for the most part,
Steve, the people who tell you that Santa don't exist, they're just called assholes.
Well, yeah, your parents eventually, break you the bad news, right?
Well, exactly. Yeah, when you're starting to hit your 20s like you, Steve, and you're still sitting around waiting for putting out milk and cookies,
But that's what beliefs are. I mean, we believe different things, right? I don't think it's unreasonable to say, well, I formulated beliefs that I don't believe in Santa Claus because I can show you why. It's just not physically possible. But, I may believe in a God. Okay, that's two different things. You're comparing apples and oranges, and I don't see the similarities that people are trying to make here.
I taught my nephew that if anybody tells him that Santa Claus isn't real, to scream heretic and kick him in the balls.
You smack him.
Wait a minute. What is with this Santa Claus isn't real nonsense?
Yeah, I'm just finding that out right now, man. So
you guys are joking.
My whole world is crushed.
It's okay, Slim, it's okay. Just put out the milk and cookies. It's okay.
Not for another 6 months,
buddy. There's a practical application, and Daniel Dennett kind of went into this. And there is a good neurobiology evidence for it. You have a system where you have a belief in Santa Claus, and eventually you have to reach the stage where you have to realize that your parents lied to you about it. If your social networking and your personal relationships with people is so fragile that you go into panic attack and can't believe anything ever gone, you probably won't be very effective in dealing with a world of limited information and people dissembling and all the rest. So
I never
as a
believed in
function
Santa as growing up, so I never had to like get that
Santa Claus.
realization from my parents.
Santa Claus kind of has to exist. If there's no jolly white bearded old man, then how do you explain Daniel Dennett?
How do you explain me?
Yeah, that's what I just said. He's in the thing right now. He's in the hangout right now. So who's to say it's not real?
Yeah.
No,
and I resemble Machiavelli,
Heavy's
so I'll
not
take
here.
that side of it.
Heavy Hauler's not here, Steve.
Yeah, well.
He's naked Santa.
Wait a minute. If Santa's real, I thought Eric DeBay said that no one could go to the North Pole.
Oh, Eric DeBay said a lot of stupid shit.
Yeah, he didn't he?
Eric DeBay is apparently confused that people on Australia are upside down.
Yeah.
This is why I live in Australia. I can't believe Eric DeBay is I don't think I can take him seriously because he's so far ridiculous that the point of just being comical, and I think he doesn't care. I mean, he's making money off this.
He says that I do handstands all day long.
Pretty much.
He speaks in a really monotone, like
urology. He was in an interview last night.
He thinks that we're upside down.
He was in an interview last night that I was watching. Me and Seth were checking it out, and the guy was saying that one, nuclear power was a hoax. The field that I went to school to learn, complete hoax, right? So what everything I learned was complete bullshit. Complete misinformation. even though I was in charge of a 148 megawatt reactor, I mean, if the power came
but Steve,
from
you
somewhere,
also know that you're just an Illuminati shill anyway.
You could take your Geiger counter and go, oh look, radiation, it works.
And pretty sure that Chernobyl was real, and your American aircraft carriers are real.
Well, look, Steve, if you actually worked in nuclear power, then how do you explain all the trucks of coal coming into the facility, huh?
We didn't have any coal trucks.
So
from Washington State, where we got Hanford, so that's kind of and coal shipments. So that's not going to Hanford, of course.
Is it really kind of disturbing seeing RJ voice and his mouth completely out of sync? Is that just me that sees that?
I don't actually watch people on Hangouts. So I'm on my phone, so I don't even notice.
Yeah, it's a huge lag. It's kind of.
I apologize for my disjointed character.
It's okay. I got a good camera. This camera's pretty decent for a couple bucks. It's not too bad.
This at all. This is astonishing. Just
oh my god!
The 2001 future.
Oh my god. Okay, I found the best thing about flat earthers ever. There are these flat earthers who say that volcanoes are a hoax. Yes.
Tornadoes.
I was listening to some flat earthers the other day, maybe a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying that plate tectonics proves the Earth is flat because there's these large tectonic plates, and plates are flat. So there's these 1,000-mile plates that are totally flat. They know that they're flat because the word used to describe them is plate.
There you go.
No, that's basically
kind of weird. This is kind of weird because do any of them live in Hawaii? If they think that volcanoes are not real.
Well, clearly, it's actually Satan. It's Satan farting, is what it is.
I just searched up volcano hoax on YouTube, and the second result was flat Earth volcano hoax reaches new levels of mouth-breathing idiocy.
Yeah.
By Aaron Dover. And this is the description. I swear to you, this is true.
We're seeing a trope materializing in there because there's nothing in conventional creationist lore that would have been building on that. So they're kind of inventing something out of thin air.
They're building their own little new niche, right? They want their own kind of thing. Now, a lot of them are young Earth creationists, but they've taken dumb fuckery to a whole new level. DeBay had actually advocated that the reason why eulogy is going to love this one. Eulogy. The reason why radio waves propagate further at night is because I'll use the paraphrased version. that radio waves degrade in sunlight.
So okay,
What?
Radio waves
Radio
degrade in
waves
sunlight.
degrade in
Yeah.
sunlight.
Wait.
Yeah, that's Pseudo's
Did
version.
anyone like
That-
take a lesson? Wait, hang on a second.
all
Hang on a
the
second.
time when I'm driving during the sunlight.
Too many people
I
talking.
say, yeah, that explains.
He
I just heard that
basically-
one key word, and I seriously thought that this was them taking a lesson from Ronnie.
No. He actually, what he said was that sunlight causes radio waves to be weakened or something like that. And it's like, no. The reason why it goes further at night is because you lose the higher layers in the ionosphere, and so you have a higher degree of bounce. That's it. It's not that complicated. You have here, and then you have here.
Sorry,
I did that
are
when
we
I
saying
had a radio communications license.
radio waves degrade in water? What?
Radio
No,
waves degrade in
sunlight.
sunlight.
Okay, sorry.
Sunlight.
DNA is a radio wave
So
confirmed.
that was his reasoning why we get a bigger skip. Like when you bounce off the lower layer of the ionosphere, there's actually 2 layers that are up there that skips on, but it'll actually just kind of come back down. But at night, those layers disappear, so you have the higher layers up, so it actually goes higher up and higher down. It's basically math, right? It's not that hard, but they're confused by this.
So I had a question that I wanted to bring up here because it stemmed from a post that the HT here made, and it was a question about objective morals. Did you want to ask that again there, HT?
Wow, no
Yes.
no subject change there, is there? That was subtle.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Okay.
wait, can I just
Yeah, let Calzer finish his
No.
train of thought on this for a second. Come on.
No, Cal, shut up. HT, go.
Yeah,
No, he's kidding, HT.
the
Go ahead.
HT
Hang on, HT. Cal,
Yep.
finish your thing. Go ahead, Cal.
sorry.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, I was just joking, man.
I
I'm
know,
just
I know
joking.
you were. I know you were.
Okay. Wait. So am I going?
Yes. Yes.
Am I going? Oh, okay. So
No, I'm kidding,
this
you're not.
flat Earth.
I'm sorry.
Wait,
Yeah.
who's talking then?
Are you not watching a screen?
Oh, am I not? Oh, sorry.
Oh, no,
I don't see him on screen.
No, just go.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Aaron Dover, a flat earther, said in his video, "Volcano hoax reaches new levels of mouth-breathing idiocy." His His description says, "Scientists have now proven that if you believe in volcanoes and lava after watching this, then you are clinically speaking a cunt."
Wow.
So amazing.
Well,
So yes, Aaron Dover believes that volcanoes do not exist.
I think some of these people set out just to make a video so dumb that they're going to want to see who's going to believe it.
I remember showing
and
some
then
of the non-existent volcano off of my driveway after Mount St. Helens, so I must have been hallucinating.
No.
Let
It didn't erupt though. It's just a mountain.
I don't know why I never get a chance to
Sorry.
finish the train of thought.
So go Steve.
I kind of lost it now. I was going to say, oh yeah. So I think some of these people actually set out to make a video so fucking strange, so absurd, just to see if they can get people to buy into it. And then they realize that people will buy into it. They go, oh fuck, I get views, and they make more. And that's when they end up being like Orphan Red.
Oh, that's true though.
Yeah.
The argument I've been proposing to flat earthers recently, because it's an internal contradiction that I think that they don't even realize that they have, is they seem to all just accept the fact that atmosphere, that the air is thinner at altitude, right? Air pressure is less at altitude, and generally more the lower you go, below sea level, or sea level is the highest. And there's no accounting for this on flat Earth, especially if you believe there's a dome. There's no gravity in a dome. The pressure ought to be uniform. And this is an internal contradiction that none of them realize that they have. And I've been bringing this up to flat Earthers recently.
Do you know there's actually a law for that, Seth? It's
No.
called Pascal's pressure law. The pressure exerted on an enclosed fluid at rest will be transmitted equally and undiminished throughout the walls of this container. So if you have an enclosed fluid, and obviously atmosphere is a gas, which is a fluid, if you have that in a container and you have any kind of pressure in it, it's going to be on the dome. It's going to be equally transmitted throughout the fluid. You're not going to have any kind of difference in air pressure, if that's the case.
So, like, like flat earthers, they say that air
flat.
density is what causes gravity, but the problem is that when you take a rock and a feather in a vacuum and then drop it, they drop at the same rate, and they still fall at the same speed and at the same rate. So it's definitely not air density that's pushing things down. And then there's the idea that the elevator disk, which I would call it, where the entire flat Earth disk is moving up at 9.81 meters per second, and that's what causes gravity. That works, but after only 355 days, the disk could be the speed of light.
Yeah,
So
that's the problem. If you,
Yeah.
if you have that upwards acceleration, you got that upwards vector of 98.8 meters per second squared. Yeah, like you said, and not some. It's very quickly you're gonna be reaching light speed.
Yeah, and so you also have to flush your relativity theory down the drain, which
Well,
of course
they
gets
already
into
do.
that.
The argument
equal
that
MC.
the argument that they were having last night, RJ, was that, and I love this. I love this. I swear to God, Eric DeBay and the other people were talking about Aries failure, and all of it was like, oh yeah, that just definitely proves aether exists and that we're stationary. And I asked him, I'm like, what was his failure? Not a single fucking one of them could tell me why it's called Aries failure. And it's so fucking simple because the failure was he failed to detect aether, which was the prevalent model that they expected to find. Some kind of Lorentz aether model was that there was a luminescence aether that light needed to propagate through, right? And they expected to find it. But his experiment failed to detect it. And they somehow in this mind think that his failure to detect aether proved aether, ergo we're stationary. I don't know how they make this leap, but when you ask any of them about the experiment, they know what it was.
I think if they can believe in flat Earth, possible for them.
But how do they twist that
they
so
come
bad?
pre-adapted to leaping.
I mean, how do they twist that? They know what the experiment was. Some of them knew what the experiment was, but they don't understand what the whole thing was with the failure. I mean, I understand the Michael C. Morley. I get that. They fucking think that for some reason the interferometer does show an ether. I don't know how. I don't know where they get that from. But with the experiment that's named Aries failure, it's a fucking failure. Oh, God.
I seriously want to hear a flat earther explain to me what is stellar aberration and what is parallax, because that is like some of the best evidence we have that the Earth is going around the sun.
Yeah, well, yeah, they can't.
I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear them explain this. It's all ridiculous. It's just like the.
I got one better, sucker. I got one better than aberration or parallax. I shit you not. DeBay was saying, hold on to your heads for this one. This is great. I love this. Yeah. He said that the starlight, chromatic aberration of starlight, right? He didn't use that word because he doesn't know what chromatic stellar aberration, or excuse me, chromatic aberration is. But
use the word that he said. Use the word.
I don't remember what he just said. The stars twinkle and change colors. Okay, is due to the Doppler shift.
Oh.
I swear to you, man. I was like, holy fucking cow, he's stupid.
Wait a minute.
How does one even come up with that fucking shit?
That's why I have to ask. I gotta be a little bit quiet.
Yeah, sound's a wave, light's a wave. Yeah.
I mean, light does have a Doppler shift. I mean, let's be real. Light does have a Doppler shift.
It is a Doppler shift though. There is red shifting.
But the color, the reason why the reason why you're seeing a twinkle is not due to Doppler shift. It's due to a chromatic aberration because the atmosphere is moving. It's in motion. So you have a different densities you're going through. So certain light's going to be bounced, more around. So it's have a slightly different color. I mean, usually a star is going to be more, reddish or whatever. But still, you got a little bit of twinkle in there, right? Because it's actually a light source. You don't get that with the planets because they're not emitting their own light. And they're a lot closer, so you have a lot more photon density. But the stars are very far away. You have a very low photon density. So even the very few photons that get through, if they change a little bit, it's going to be enough to notice there's a twinkle. But it's not due to the Doppler shift. The Doppler shift has to do with the relative velocity between you and something else. If something's receding from us, right, it's going to be redshifted, right? The spectral lines in the spectrogram is going to be moved to one end, which is going to be redshift. If it's moving towards, it's going to be blue shift. That's not the same as a chromatic aberration. I don't know how.
Yes, and even so,
well, you know about
chromatic
this stuff,
aberrations. We can actually take account of chromatic aberrations. That's what we do when we have those kind of computer generated image of stars, far away stars. What we do is just simply shine a laser up into the atmosphere.
Right.
Measure the disturbances of that, because when you shine a laser up, you're essentially creating a fake star. up in the up the top there, and you can measure the amount of chromatic aberration.
Yeah, and they actually
of
have
that
they have the
particular
mirrors.
star.
What they'll
And
do is they'll compensate for that.
yeah, you model that. You model the disturbances, and you can actually compensate throughout your entire image, so you actually get a much clearer image of the stars that you're taking pictures of.
So how does that have to? How does he get? But how does he warp his brain and Doppler shift on that?
It sounds
Probably
scientific.
Doppler shift. You need some sort of move.
Guy talking about plate tectonics.
Well, yeah, if they can think plate
My
tectonics
question-
is plate tectonics proves flat Earth.
My question is how do so like all over Twitter. Obviously, there were flat earthers all over Twitter, but there were astronomers all over Twitter, and probably maybe every week or so, I see at least one person post a time lapse of the moons orbiting Jupiter. I think we've concluded that since ether is just very speculative and just bullshit, how do these moons orbit around Jupiter if it's not gravity, and then gravity is apparently just a hoax? Like, what pulls the moons in orbit around Jupiter? I shit you not. The flat earthers, they say that the images are just pre-programmed into the telescope.
Yeah, they'll say any bit of dumb fuckery no matter how bad, because they have no level of competency or even integrity, and I think a lot of them are just trying to fuck with people.
I know, but it's just because G-Man, like last year when G-Man was in a debate with some flat earthers, and he was like getting torn apart by them. It was with,
don't go spin in the water bottle.
it was with Jekyll. Jekyll was in it, and G-Man was asking, oh yeah, why we have satellite image? So we have telescope. I've looked through a telescope and I've seen Jupiter and Saturn, and then I can't remember who it was, but one of them said, if you look, he said, quote, if you're looking for a digital telescope, you'll see a pretty picture of a Saturn, and it's got rings around it, and you see all these details, but
sounds like Arcane.
I think that might have been.
It sounds like Arcane. But then again,
Galileo
Arcane also
really
stated things
had those
like birds fly by
digital
farting.
telescopes back in the 1600s.
Yeah, I had an argument with a flat earther a few months ago about this, and I asked him, oh yeah, we like Galileo did not have the technology back then. You know what he said? He said, "Oh, he was just lying because he's a Freemason." And like, ever since then, we have had people who aren't Freemasons see Jupiter. Freemasons. You have someone like that. It's just
Toucans. They have the ability not to think about what they don't want to think about on the one hand, and along with that is they're addicted to secondary sources. These are not people that are ever going to read a book about Galileo. They're not ever going to look through a telescope or one adequate enough for their purposes. They're simply going to be copying tropes that they repeat ad nauseum. That's what we find routinely in looking at the flat earthers. These are not primary source people.
Yeah.
And if you have the ability to do that, then boy, there's all bets are off. You can believe anything you want.
Yeah, there's only a handful.
And they're prone to leaping to conclusions. It's epistemological parkour.
There's only a handful of primary sources for young earthers. There's only so many people that can put out so much fucked up information. Eric DeBay, Jism, Dranism, Antonio Super Rats, these guys, right? So most the other ones, like you said, they just parrot what they put out. That's all it is. It's just literally they.
I'm literally measuring this over land in my TIP project because nobody had ever thought to actually pin down who's citing who and what. It turns out of the some 2,000 anti-evolutionists that I've been processing, 95% of them don't cite primary sources at all. The 5% who do are only paying attention to about 10% of the data stream. Again, I'm measuring that as well. So now I get to actually see this. So you can see that prevalence of secondary addiction going on in the much bigger creationism movement. Flat earthers are just a little tiny little niche subset of that are just taking it out to a super extreme.
Yeah, but about Joanism, I'm sorry to say, but I don't think Joanism is suicide. I think he's a Poe.
No,
I'm sorry.
Jainism does not believe his own bullshit. He did this just for the Patreon and everything else.
But I mean, do you remember in 2015, the Armored Skeptic had a huge thing with Jaren, like where Skeptic made two videos towards Jaren, and then Jaren came back with like an hour-long response, and then Skeptic made another video where we reacted to that,
Yeah,
and that was the end of it. But it was like
Drainism
the
made some
comment
videos with
was,
Reds against Reds, and Reds has made many
Yeah.
videos against Drainism.
Yeah, but this is about Skeptic, right? In those like 4 videos, the 2 from Skeptic, the 1 from Jaren, and the extra from Skeptic, it was just the entire comment section was just mental. But in the last one, well, I should say the 3rd and the 4th one, when Ahmed Skeptic was asking, oh yeah, what is the name of the force that pulls things towards the flat Earth? Jaren literally said weight by itself, weight without gravity.
Yeah, weight is actually a force that's equal to gravity,
yeah.
right? Times
MG.
your mass, right? So I mean, you can't have weight without gravity because it's just mass in a gravitational field. So
So this is exactly what Ahmed Skeptic said. He was like, what quote? Well, what is acting on that weight? What is that is forcing the weight to go in one direction? There has to be a force in the universe that gives weight its properties. If gravity doesn't exist, then weight is meaningless. If gravity doesn't exist, the mass of an object does not determine what direction it goes in and how quickly it goes in that direction. Flat earthers believe in gravity. They just don't gravity. They just have a different word for it, unquote. That I literally cited all of that, but
That's like calling your cat a floor monkey.
Yes.
Electromagnetism, just something.
yeah,
You're-
electric universe.
Yeah.
It's all plasma.
Hobsky was trying to push that too. He thought gravity was an electromagnetic phenomenon too, and that got him about to.
Someone cut out.
RG just cut out, yeah.
Well, I don't think he cuts out. I think he just. I think he's done, but his video continues. It's like I said, it's really out of sync.
The stupid is too much. He had a heart attack.
Yeah.
But then, of course, Cool Hard Logic. If I could continue, Cool Hard Logic made his video on Jaren about ripping him apart about Tycho Brahe and stellar parallax. And
Do you know he's been making really good videos lately? And yeah, Cool Hard Logic makes brilliant videos, but actually, Shoe on Head, Armor Skeptic's girlfriend, she's got some pretty good videos. I gotta admit, she's got a brain. She's hot. Don't get me wrong. She's really fucking hot, but she's really got it going on. She's not a dumbass. Go figure, right? I mean, I don't think our Armor Skeptic would be dating a ditzy blonde. But yeah, no, I actually was listening to one of her videos today, and I was like, oh wow, she's got like some good points to be made. I never really listened to her before. She's got a hell of a following, though.
716,000.
Yeah,
Talking about Schwanhead?
I think she's more popular than he is.
She is more popular than he is. Oh wow. But
yeah, don't worry, we'll never get to that level. We don't have the type of videos that make that kind of popularity. Plus, these guys got on the ground floor. They've been around a very long time, and back 5-6+ years ago, there wasn't as much content, and so it's a lot easier to get those big numbers. Very difficult to get them today. People that are getting 2,000 views a video, you're doing okay.
So I do want to say this, right? So I've been using Celestia, a space program that simulates like the solar system and a bunch of other stars in the galaxy.
Stellarium.
And a little bit of Stellarium as well. I use Stellarium as well, but Celestia I actually like because it's based on actual data of the heliocentric model, and I use it against flat earthers all the time. The fact that it works, right? It works. It freaking works. Like if you like set yourself down in Celestia to your position at the right time at night, and then just you can watch the stars exactly where they are. Celestia is always correct, except for maybe the position of the ISS. It gets that incorrect. But other than that, all the stars and all the planets, they're all in the exact same spot they should be in the heliocentric model. How can anyone? It's almost like, dare I say, we live in a Celestia simulation.
Because it's just they'll come up with some conspiratorial thing.
Yeah, but like Celestia must be part of the conspiracy, though, right?
Well, they're all are. Yeah, anybody that makes anything related to astronomy, whether it be the software, the telescopes, they're all in on it. You know, there's no depths these guys won't go to try to rationalize their belief or to bullshit people. It's one or the other. Hey, real quickly, eulogy. You said something in the live chat. Tetrahedron confused you with TE the other day. What was the story on that?
It was kind of weird when he did that. I put a facetious quote up there, saying something about how, because he asked me a pretty dumb question. It was the dumb question that you
Well, he's a fucking
saw.
moron.
He's a fucking moron. True. It was that dumb question that I couldn't make heads or tails. I was thinking, this question doesn't even make any sense. So rather than trying to actually teach him on this, I was just facetiously putting up my own quote of Ronnie, which was, "Is 3 cubits the circumference of the ratio of pi?" And he answered that question.
Oh, wow.
He fucking answered that question, and I had to explain to him, this is a rhetorical question.
What did he
You're not meant to
possibly answer?
You're not meant to answer it.
What did he possibly answer?
And then, and you know what's even worse? And you know what's even worse? He came back and said, my rhetorical question was badly worded, had poor grammatical structure, and I should not. I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
What the hell's wrong with these people? Oh my god.
They must impose. No,
He's so damn dumb. Tetrahedron.
I think I just figured out what Ronnie is doing wrong with the math with the whole pi thing.
He's listening to tetrahedron?
No.
I've even fully cited Red's Rhetoric's video about him being done fuck of the year. It was
me
like
and my 400 sock accounts that I voted for, right? According to him, he said I have all these sock accounts voted for him. I'm like, Ronnie, don't flatter yourself. I voted once for you, motherfucker. Or maybe I think twice. I'm gonna go on a limb. I don't know. I think I may have done twice, but I don't have any of the sock accounts. Well, I do now, but yeah, he was just so. He was like, well, Steve, just.
But yeah, you have them now, Steve, because you had to make them in order to vote for Ronnie.
Well, no, these were in the last few weeks actually, but now next year is going to be challenging, or this year, I guess you can say next dumb fuck of the year is going to be challenging.
In that level of dumb fuckery,
I personally, excuse me, I personally voting for.
I seriously thought he was just trolling me at that stage, but I was like,
no, he's that stupid.
This guy is fucking dumb.
He's been in a Facebook group with me for
I need to meet this guy.
Hang on, he's been in a Facebook group with me for quite some time, and everybody in that group that's a scientist, just he's like a ragdoll to them. They just you fuck him in the ass and then throw him to the next person. They're so hostile to him anymore because he's so dishonest. But anyways, this season for dumb fuck of the year, I personally I'm going to say right now, I personally think a shoo-in is C. Brown for the heavier isotopes were created by lightning via Z-pitch. I don't know how you get more dumb fuck than that. I just don't know where you would ever possibly get as stupid to say that heavier elements like plutonium is created by lightning. And not okay. It gets worse. Not only did he make such a fucking absolutely retarded statement, he doubled and tripled down on it after I literally had a PhD in plasma fucking physics come in to explain Z-pinch and explain how dumb and just astronomically dumb that was. He even called this guy a moron. And C. Brown is still going, well, he was wrong. He's a fucking PhD in this. You're an idiot that doesn't have a second grade education. You misread a paper that we've all showed you is wrong. The paper he got, which by the way he didn't even read right. But the paper he got was from alternate news or web page preaching about electric universe.
That wasn't even a paper. The wonderful one he cited was some stupid
alternate energy free site.
Alternate science kind of thing from Ukraine about cold fusion.
Yeah, it wasn't even about what he thought it was about. Nothing remotely close. And worse, he said, what did he say? Oh yeah, all 94 natural elements. Like, wait,
So
does
okay,
does
Oh my
94 now
god!
natural elements?
What? Oh my god!
I think I found the ultimate dumbfuck because I was messaging Steve earlier about this dumbfuck I called Night Norge. He can't obviously run because he's not part of Red's panel. And he's not really. I mean, he's a flat earther conspiracy nut. Google Night Norge. He's a fucking idiot.
Hold on, Cal. Hold on. In order to be the dumb fuck of the year, I don't believe you could be a flat earther.
No.
I'll explain why.
No, you can be. You
And
can be.
that's no. It's just because there are so many trolls. You can't tell who are the trolls and who are not.
Well, that's not the reason. Last year there was Antonio Subares and Pissy Peter were flat earthers. They were nominated, but you got to do something out of the ordinary, like Antonio Subares in his video.
This guy. Okay. I think he has a problem with the ball Earth. I should probably watch his video first because I might misquote him, but maybe. He seems to think. Again, don't comment me on this. Don't comment me on this. You can check yourself. I'm not entirely sure myself, but he seems to think that the ball Earth maps are wrong. I swear to God, he uses Mercator maps as a way of proving that the ball Earth maps are wrong by saying, "Look, Greenland is bigger than Africa."
Oh yeah, no, they do that. They don't understand what a Mercator map actually is. They have no idea how it works. They don't know what a slippery protection is.
They always use the UN flat map to actually say yes.
Yeah,
that's how the flat Earth works.
It's funny because he goes, "Oh yeah, Greenland isn't that big compared to Africa," but he never looks at his own map and go, "Oh yeah, Australia isn't twice the size of America."
People are like, "This sounds like Zulu."
Really...
I'm like, how does not sound like Zulu?
Yeah, at this point, I would want to use a picture of McGree. This is not a pipe. They just can't get the medium and the message separated.
A lot of people.
This cow is
I also have a flat earther story about lightning too. I'm kind of waiting to tell.
But a lot of people are saying Cal sounds like Zulu. I'm like, no, he doesn't.
No.
Zulu is just. By the way, Zulu's kind of banned for a while, so. And Mike's still speechless that C. Brown was claiming that plutonium is created by lightning. Oh, yeah. He said that all the elements were created by just everything decaying down into them, from lightning strikes producing these very high, massive,
high energy fusion.
Yeah.
High energy fusion.
Yeah.
So I just at the end of that little discussion, I just said, fuck this. I'm just going to ask him one simple question: how many lightning bolt nuclear explosions did Noah dodge?
Well, and why don't we see it today? I mean, first of all, the whole thought process is so foreign. It's just, I mean, I have to really fuck my mind up just to even consider what he's trying to say. But how? I mean, because there's no mechanism by which lightning could do that, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, well, hold on. Is lightning? Well, what is the claim that lightning makes this whole cloth ex nihilo, or what?
The paper that it's not even a paper. The blog that he found from this alternative energy source was talking about using Z-pinch to create fusion, which they do. And they said they used high electrical discharges. Well, this relates to him to mean lightning. And so he's like, well, they can do this in a lab. Okay, they produced helium. I think it was deuterium and helium. I think there's the two things they produced, okay? They didn't produce anything higher than that. You're not going to get the higher elements because at iron 50, you need more energy to put into the system to fuse it than you get out. And so it's just not a self-sustaining reaction, right? So fusion at that point is effectively useless because you're putting a lot more energy in than you're ever going to get out from the fusion itself. Lightning can't give you energy, right? You can't produce something more than what the energy input is. That's called over unity.
The funny thing about that wasn't just simply because he was saying that lightning produces the heavy elements. It is true that lightning does have some Z-pinch effects. It usually just simply knocks some neutrons. It changes the neutron density of the atmosphere. That is true.
I agree with that.
There is some effect in there.
Yeah.
Yes. But it is not energetic enough to produce even deuterium. It's not. Well, sorry, it is. Sorry, it is enough.
Well, it would be
to produce
deuterium. It's hydrogen.
but
The next step
it
would
is
be
not
deuterium.
enough. Yes, but it's not enough to actually go and produce helium. It does not have that kind of energy level. But the funny thing about that was Seabrow didn't just simply say that lightning produced every element up to 94, which is plutonium, which is also not naturally occurring. He also said that supernova did not have enough energy to produce the heavier elements, but somehow lightning did.
Oh, for God's sake.
So essentially, he was trying to say that
Okay.
lightning had more energy than supernova.
Lightning had more energy than a
Somebody
Wrap
get me.
that one throughout your head. I mean, because
Does
like a
anyone-
supernova would be like of a dying giant star that is up to like what the orbit of Mars.
It's like
And he
10
thinks that
times
the
the
Earth-
like over.
He thinks that the Earth can somehow contain that amount of energy in a single lightning bolt.
Okay,
If anyone
Right.
has C. Browns' docs, give them to me because I have a flux capacitor to sell him.
does anyone have CHL's oven gloves?
The oven mitts?
The oven mitts, yeah.
No.
CHL oven mitts.
Yeah, for
Are you
when
face
you're
palming?
face palming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
The
But how would you? But Eulogy, how would you get if you let's say hypothetically you can create plutonium and stuff, which by the way those are not natural. The highest is 92 for uranium. That's where natural stops. But
Well, you actually can occasionally. There's a
Small-
Precambrian reactor that produced that.
the
It's
Oak-
hard to
the-
do.
The Oklo reactor, 1.8 billion years ago did. Okay, but that was 1.8 billion years ago, right? Yes, that's true. But you're not gonna be able to take that right and get every single isotope in the periodic chart. That's what we find naturally occurring. It doesn't work that way. You have certain decay chains, and these decay chains are very set about what they'll decay into, and you usually end up with like polonium, and you end up with iron at most, or lead. And I don't know where he thinks that it's going to create all the elements that we see in the periodic chart. Why would he even create?
I would also like him to understand how the hell he managed to get technetium-99. Technetium is not naturally occurring, and it's in the middle of the bloody periodic table. It's not even anywhere close to
And
94.
isn't that like worth like $1 million a gram or some shit like that? One of them is
I'm
really
not
really
sure.
expensive. I don't remember which one it is.
No, I don't think it's worth that much. Technetium is usually used in hospitals, though.
Which one?
So-
There's one of them that's like really really expensive because there's so minuscule amount of it, right?
Unobtainium.
Bismuth,
Unobtainium. Yeah,
actively
unobtainium.
treasure.
Yeah, I know what technetium
Okay.
is, but I did thought it was worth a little bit though. I could be wrong.
So I was on Twitter last week, as I always am, and this flat Earth, like we all divide the flat Earthers up. I divide them into two main groups, and maybe a third group, maybe the Christian fundamentalists and the New Agers, which I think are led by Eric Dubay. Maybe I remember wrong. Is Eric Dubay sort of New Ager kind of woo kind of guy, or is he just?
He's just batshit crazy.
Okay, he's just
He-
well, I
he
just
thought-
divide them into New Agers.
He thought
and fundamentalists.
he claims Hiroshima and Nagasaki were fire bombings.
Yeah.
Just
So
carpet bombings.
I just divide them into the Christian fundamentalists and the New Agers, and there's a lot of conflict between the two because the Christians are calling them a cult and whatnot. And there was this one flat earther, New Ager, and he, for fuck's sake, he thinks that he seems to think that the day and night cycle. I need to show you this GIF because fuck me, it doesn't even make any sense. He seems to think that the day and night cycle is caused by the yin and yang sun and moon going in circles. I gotta show you this. It's ridiculous.
Well, while you're doing that, let me welcome. Here we go, Alvin. Yo, Alvin, go, Alvin, yay!
What up? What up?
What up, dog? Boy, you haven't
All
got.
right, so you think
hang on,
this is
hang on one second, Cal. You haven't gotten to my neck of the woods in ages, Alvin.
Yeah, I've recently converted into flat earthism.
Awesome. Awesome. I knew you would. I'm good. Congratulations.
No, I'm just playing. Go ahead.
Flat Earthism. I like that.
Yeah,
flat earthism.
Yeah, go ahead, Cal. So this is the yin yang bullshit. Yeah.
So this is how he thinks the day night cycle worked. I talked with him, silly flat earthers. I gave him a link to my blog because I'm a very big self advertiser. He said proves nothing. You say it over atmosphere and show the grammar is atrocious. And then later on in a completely different thing, the same guy comes. He asked, why is it that the shadow of the moon, if the Earth is spherical, why is it flat? That's the moon's shadow, you fucking idiot!
Yeah, that's kind of redundant in that case. Yeah.
Why do they explain eclipses?
And then he asked, why is it red? Then I told him
They don't.
Then I told him about what's that effect? Something about an effect.
The umbra and the preumbra during lunar eclipse.
No, the
like
red.
with the blood moon. What's the effect? It's something.
Earth shine.
Yeah, well, I just said it's the Earth's atmosphere. Lets red light from the Earth. And I gave him a Wikipedia link to it, the lunar eclipse, and then he says
when you're going through the umbra or the preumbra, but mostly in the preumbra, it's the same reason why when light goes through the atmosphere, it will actually change a little bit. The sun goes down, right? Because it's white light coming into it, but it's yellow star that we see, right? But it's actually going to the red end of the spectrum as the gas go through more dust and atmosphere. Same thing. It's just going through more dust and more atmosphere.
And he just says, like, I gave him a Wikipedia link to lunar eclipses, and he just said, no, that's not an answer. All you have is words, and where is the evidence in video? There should be loads if it's true. # flat Earth. And then he just continues bothers me about the fucking shadow, and I'm like, there's just no arguing for this. Yeah, that's really all.
You got to remember, these guys literally have second grade educations. They don't understand evidence. They don't get it. No, you have to treat them like they're a child. I mean, like I do with Alvin. It's like, okay, Alvin, let me explain to you something very basic here.
They literally don't think about things they don't think about.
Yeah. Well, look at Heavy with his beautiful beard.
And then there's the dumb fucks like what's his face, Night Norge again, who thinks that who says that if the moon goes around the Earth and the Earth goes around the sun, we should have an eclipse every single new moon, full moon, because But he forgot to mention. Oh wait, the Earth's orbit isn't perfectly lined up with the ecliptic of the sun and the Earth. It's actually inclined at like 5 degrees. So that's why as we go around the sun, there's a little bit of a thing about the orbit, so it only lines up every so often.
Hey, Steve.
By the way, I meant to say penumbra. I think I kept saying.
Hey,
penumbra.
Steve, check it out. I thought I had one, right? I thought I had one. Listen, I just got this new camera, and it got like super zoom optical lens, right? So I actually took a picture of the moon, like it's right. You can see the craters and everything, right? So I showed this guy. I'm like, listen, this picture isn't from NASA. It's not a computer generated image. This is a picture I took with my own camera. And to me, when you look at the picture, it's obvious that the moon is reflecting some light from somewhere. If you don't want to say it's the sun, fine, but look at the rocky crust. It's not like some neon stuff. It looks like a rock. And I showed him it, and he told me it was a hologram.
Yeah.
At that point, I can't say nothing. I can't do nothing.
Your hands to be done.
Oh, you can't.
Yeah. By the way, Rational Martian had a better explanation, and he's right. He says that it refracts during the different frequencies differentially, meaning that different frequencies of light are going to change differentially. Chromatic aberration, the same reason why stars twinkle, allows a redder end to illuminate the moon, blood moon, which makes sense, right?
But it literally looked like a flashlight on a rock when the image I got.
There's Pillbox, who legitimately appears to believe that the moon's light has a cooling effect,
I think he's full of shit.
Oh God.
which is one of the dumbest claims I've heard.
Well, and here's the thing again. You know, they'll watch these videos on, even though they have videos debunking that. But if you ask them very clearly, show me thermodynamically how this can happen, right? And then they're just, oh well, they'll throw physics shit to the window, right? Doesn't matter.
Well, have you seen the video that he points to prove this? Have you seen the video?
I've seen some of them that they're like, okay, let's take a temperature. We're gonna put it over here. We're gonna cover this.
The one that he showed me, the one he linked me to, was a guy basically like outside in his backyard with heat lamps all over this aluminum rod. Heat lamps.
I haven't seen that
all over this fucking rod.
Yeah,
and he takes the temperature on one side of the rod versus the other side of the rod with all these heat lamps on it, like as if this is. Oh God.
Okay.
Okay.
So I just want to open up. It's on topic, but it's actually a broader issue. Have you noticed that the internet have created these hyper militant movements?
Yeah.
Yeah, they call it militant atheism.
Yeah. Like for instance, and just the biggest disclaimer ever. I'm not everybody on this panel is like a militant atheist, okay? But like in the 80s and 90s, I never remembered like an in-your-face atheist. Like I've never. It's not until the age of YouTube where I see such a thing.
Yeah, there's
you know what I'm saying?
There's a lot of rabid atheists out there, and I'm seeing them become worse than the theists used to be.
But check this out. It has nothing to do with theism or atheism. I have been tracking a specific personality type that keeps popping up in all schools of thought. I see it in theism, atheism, and now it has even spilled over into veganism, where it's this guy, it's usually a person that has a horse the height of the Empire State Building that they sit on. And if you don't do what they do exactly...
Oh, you've met Onision.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, and he...
that militant atheists are any more frequent now than they used to be, but you find out about them immediately because they go on YouTube. Madeline Murray O'Hare was an in-your-face atheist and an annoying person. So she was the rare case of somebody that got on the media. So I don't know that there's been a higher incidence of it. From what we can see from polling data and that over the years, the amount of actual seems to be relatively stable at a couple percentage points, and I'd be surprised if it changed much.
No, I agree with that, but what it is the internet has created a thing where people are more comfortable to come out, like even not just atheism, but in any school of thought. If you see somebody who's crazy aggressive in your school of thought, and you secretly want it to be like that, now the internet has made it to where groups of aggressive people in whatever ideology or whatever, they feel comfortable coming out, and then they engage in like hyperbole. Like the vegans now, they'll say some things like this. Like a vegan, they'll say something like, "Hey, if you take your kid to McDonald's and give them a milkshake, you support rape and murder. You're a terrible person because you gave them a burger milkshake." I'm like, whoa. Like, goodness Christ.
Well, that's what they say about us atheists. If you're an atheist, you believe in murder and rape and pillage and stuff.
Yeah, it's the same personality.
About the internet, it's like instant idiots. They come out of the woodwork.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be all we had was National Enquirer or some magazines and maybe some radio talk shows. And now everybody's out. Everybody's coming out of the closet.
Yeah, and now the flat earthism. It's a real. You have passionate flat Earth people that is really passionate. It's like a real thing. Like,
Alvin, I agree with you. Well, hang on one second. Well, I agree with you though. I think it needs to be pointed out that there are people that are going to be rabid no matter what. Some of them just happen to flock to atheism and be militant. Some of them flock to creationism and be militant. You have these types of personalities where they get in this mindset and they just become a fanatic about it. There's a cult mentality. Okay, and the cult mentality, and I don't know why some of these atheists don't recognize it, but I've seen them do it, especially in the last week, especially. Oh my God, have I seen this prevalent so much with certain people that they use the same exact techniques that creationists use. And I point it out every time. You know, you're gish galloping, you're dodging the question, you're shotgunning. They're doing the exact same techniques. They're not addressing the actual argument, right? And they think that they're winning. I had a guy just recently. I had a guy just recently, right? He's still messaging me, right, trying to troll me on my own forum in the Great Debate community. Good old Crick. He actually shut down a thread proclaiming victory that he won, right? And it was the ultimate game of pigeon chess. And everybody's everybody's lambasting him for it. They're like, dude, you got your ass beat kind of shit. 93% of the Great Debate community agreed with me on the poll. He didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. He was a militant atheist, but he decided, I'm going to shut the thread down, which you can't do unless you're a moderator, and declaim victory. And he's like, oh, I'm 1-0 now, Steve. You know, you didn't make your argument. I was like, you didn't even know what the fuck you're talking about.
See, let me tell you something about people. And here's another personality trait with this kind of person that pops up everywhere. The word nuance does not exist in their world whatsoever. There's absolutely no nuance.
I just talked about that today. That some of these arguments are. Did you watch the video that I had today? Because I swear to God, synchronicity here. I just said the same thing. That a lot of these arguments are very, very nuanced, and they're like a bull in a china shop, right? They don't understand the finesse of some of these arguments because they're not all very simple, right?
Nah, not at all.
My question is
gradients to it. There's gradient.
Yeah, do you think there's going to be any militant atheists for Dumb Fuck of the Year 2017? I want to see that. Like that's
No, but see, we got combinations though. Have you seen the militant atheist flat earther? I've seen that.
Oh God.
you got combinations here.
I haven't encountered too many of those. That would be an outlier.
Then I've seen the militant vegan Christian. They intersect. I've seen these things.
I didn't know you were a Moby fan.
I just want to see a militant atheist, just like atheist, in the runner-up for Dumb Fuck of the Year. Like not a runner-up. Sorry, just a candidate.
There might be. Actually, they're not in the community anymore. But what the Forbidden Fruit could have been.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, I mean, we have a lot of rabid atheists still.
Historical perspective.
Brenda's a rabid atheist. She goes fucking nuts all the fucking time she loses her shit.
I came in a little late. I had a question that's going to back us up a little bit. The thing about the lightning making heavier elements, now is that a flat earther making that claim?
Brown. Here, let me share it. Let me share it.
I mean, is it a flat earther though?
What?
Is it a flat earther making the claim?
No, you'll see Brown.
Oh, so he's not a flat earther then?
I don't think he's a flat earther, but he's a motherfucking dumbass.
Well, the reason I was asking was, if a flat earther was saying lightning was making the heavier elements, that lightning must have been traveling way the hell underground to do it. Because we have mines and stuff.
Let me share this. Let me share this. Give me a second.
Just look, we're using terms like flat earther. Like that thing exists now.
Oh my God.
There's a real thing called a flat earther. The internet is the Tower of Babel.
Okay, but Alvin, come on. I mean, let's be realistic here, okay? What I think is funny is when you have somebody that's just dissing on flat Earth. Then I'm not talking about you, but you have somebody who's dissing on flat Earth. Well, maybe I am. I don't remember. No, I don't think you are. But you have a flat Earther, or somebody's dissing on flat Earther, and they believe that Noah's Ark literally accounts for all the species diversification we see today.
Now, I'll provide an apologetic to that.
This is not global flood.
Okay, this is why I'll say it's a minute difference, but there is a difference. You have Noah's Ark thing that happened in the past thousands of years ago. Oh, Steve gone. Where's Steve?
I got bitches all on my dick every day.
Oh no, did
on my bowels, licking on my bowels.
That's okay.
Hi, Steve. Oh, okay, Steve. So this it's a minute difference. When you talk about Noah's Ark, you're talking about something that happened thousands of years ago. And when it comes to history, it's hard to deal with facts when it comes to history. So they would have a little wiggle room to say, hey, you weren't there, so you don't know. Like, they could say that thing. As opposed to the flat earth thing, it's contemporaneous. Like, we can see now that that's not the case, like, contemporaneously. You know what I'm saying?
But what I'm saying is, for somebody,
it's a little wiggle room.
Well, hang on.
I see your point, though.
For somebody to mock something so goddamn stupid as flat Earth, and then turn around and accept things like young Earth creationism, my brain just explodes, because I'm like, you're being literally as fucking stupid as they are, and you're not seeing the problem with this. There's
flat Earth.
There's different levels of stupidity, right? But there's different levels of dumb fuckery. Yeah, at the very bottom, you have flat earthers. Don't get me wrong, but young Earth creationism is not that much higher. Okay, it's really not. It's
right now. Even with the young Earth creationism,
what about geocentrism?
Geocentrism, that's up there too. That's up there too.
Even with I'll say this: even with the young Earth creationism, it's still like contemporary things where if you see a star, that debunks the being contemporaneously. If you see a star in the sky, it takes billions of years, well, I don't know, millions or billions of years for that light to hit us to see it. So that's like contemporaneously, it's over with the young Earth, right?
Yeah. Not if you answers in Genesis. Here's where the flat earther and answers in Genesis and intelligent designers who are not young Earth creationists have the same methodology. They're addicted to secondary sources. They rely on some secondary sources as non-negotiably true. They never fact check any of them. Once you have a mind that can do that and can confuse primary and secondary sources, can never conceptualize being wrong, the gate's open. So although somebody may seem terribly reasonable because they're not claiming the Earth is 6,000 years old, if all they are doing is troping a secondary source, even if they're a secular atheist, in the flat Earth.
I would say if you could quote a secondary source, as long as you're not claiming it's in a non-negotiable, infallible, true, and I can prove it, right? But don't prove it. Like if you're not doing that, you can go secondhand, but just put the disclaimer in that it's this is what I think that's happening. This is what I believe that's happening. It's not necessarily factually true, but I think this is the case.
What the hell are you guys typing in the group chat? What the hell are you typing in the group chat here? Heavy?
He's reading.
Okay.
Reading my one.
Because he's talking about supercritical water. Supercritical water below.
C. Brown.
How do you have supercritical water in the Earth crust?
That's C. Brown.
That's C. Brown.
You can get supercritical water. That's just supercritical water. Is just
Steve,
water.
Steve, you were in this chat. You were in this particular thread, and that was the same one when lightning was produced by Z-Pinch.
Yeah, no, I don't know what he means. Supercritical water is just basically water that your pressure is at above this triple point, right? So you have no distinction between your liquid phase and gas and solid phase. But I don't know how he thinks that that's going to exist in the.
He was advocating the Walter Brown Luna Bukaki model.
I thought it was a Luna Brown hydroplate theory.
Well,
that's sort of an evolution over the years. A fun thing to view from a source methods approach is to see young Earth creationists deal with geocentrists, prominent group, and it's fascinating to see a young Earth creationist suddenly become a methodological naturalist tactically, to defend the heliocentrism, and then go same bad methods when it comes to the young Earth creationism aspect. And it all boils selective they are with their sources. Once you can cross that Rubicon, don't allow anything violate a primary assumption. There are non-negotiable truths involved with anybody who has this Tortucan mindset. And even though they may appear very different in terms of content and are, anti-vaxxers can function identically to young Earth creationists when you look at how they deal with secondary sources.
Right. And I will say this, though. I did a little research on all this. You know, the hardcore fundamentalist attitude when looking at the Bible as taking everything as 100% literal really didn't come about to the early 19th century with the fundamentalist movement, where absolutely everything in this book is literal. There's no bending on it, and that kind of gave rise to the young Earth creationism, as opposed to centuries.
Yeah, it'll generated flat Earth, a revival of flat Earth movement. The 19th century flat Earthers that Alfred Wallace bumped into and had a lawsuit about that were just as head up their ass intractable as Jeranism. They just didn't have a website. That bunch came from a biblical fundamentalism point of view. The young Earth creationism, of course, is a little bit more recent, but all of that came about because the 19th century in particular was finding things that didn't fit the biblical framework. And either you could accommodate to it if you were open-minded enough and willing to flush enough of Genesis down the drain. Others temporarily can't stand that. They really don't feel not taking it at all as a package deal. And that's where that fundamentalism gives them a comfort level that people can't tolerate.
Right. And if you compare the preachers of the 19th and 20th century to how the early church fathers, like first, second century, they don't give a date for the earth at all. They just say it's old, right? But they don't. You won't find an early church father text saying the earth is 6,000 years old, right? Or maybe
it wouldn't matter if it did.
Generally thought around 6,000-ish, 10,000-ish, to the extent that they thought about it at all. But until they were forced into dealing with the issue, along with the flood and the higher criticism movement that came up in the 19th century that started dissolving the underpinnings of the scripture, at that point it gets angsty. And the fundamentalism arose as a defensive mechanism, and there are certain psychological types that really like that.
Yeah, I agree. It was a defensive, and dare I use this word again, nuance. When you look at that the early church writings, like from Papias or Irenaeus and all these guys.
Oh yeah, and Saint Augustine.
Yeah, it wasn't
about it.
Yeah, it wasn't this. This is the exact literal thing all the time. They had
Cosmos into Plousty a few centuries on, who was a flat earther, and he tried to dig in his heels on it, but the church had adopted Aristotelian physics, and so all of that carried with it a spherical earth and a geocentrism. And eventually that was a little ticking time bomb that was going to produce a problem for Galileo and that bunch farther down the stream. But they had a long time to work on that one.
But yeah, because I'm not a Catholic, but even if you look at certain now, they really don't hold on to Bible literalism. That, like, if you look at somebody like a Bishop Barron and like these guys, they're more, I guess, science-based when it comes to science and religious.
Yeah, the Vatican Observatory, but that's official doctrine. There is a small niche, hyper-conservative Roman Catholicism that are geocentrists. And Ellwanger, who was the guy that sparked the Eanism rules in the 1980s, was a conservative geocentrist Roman Catholic. The one and two who think that's too radical. And so they're all along. But when they find some crisis point, then they can start activating. And you find a lot of Americans is...
Yeah, but then and you all, but
Vatican
then you
II
also
papal
have,
boogaloo.
you got the guys like Kenneth Miller, right, who's a Catholic, and he's debating intelligent design, right?
Michael Behe is a Roman Catholic on the opposite side, intelligent
Right.
design.
Well, I think the intelligent design, they want this to
Certain
be
data
true. That's the
sets.
only reason why they try to come up with information to try to support their narrative. I think they are honest people. Some of them, like Behe and those guys, I think they do want to believe something more, and I do know that they're religious, but I think they go about it the wrong way because they're throwing away science in order to actually support their agenda, and that's where they fail. But I understand the need to want to try to show people that God exists, but to do so dishonestly, because intelligent design is a dishonest movement.
Have an
This
ability
is the
to
way it is.
rationalize. Let me give my chocolate cake analogy because this kind of puts the limits about how different people rationalize religion. Imagine that the Bible is a chocolate cake recipe, and instead of it instructs you to use cement. The accommodationist rationalizer can say, well, we didn't really know how cake baking was in the ancient, so the important thing is God wants you to have cake. And they can take whatever they want of the recipe that makes it work good for you. The literalists can't take that position. So they basically take the point of view, no, this is God's recipe. We follow it literal, but that's the way it's supposed to be. Live with it.
Oh, man. How I view the Bible, right? I'm like, for example, like some of these prophecies made or whatever, right? Like, would you be impressed if somebody in 1850 said, in 2004, there's going to be the first black president, and his name is going to be Obama Bush? Would you be pretty impressed by that? That would be pretty impressive. It's not exactly correct, but if somebody in 1850 said that, we'll be like, wow, right? So I'm not necessarily a literist where everything has to be exactly precisely correct, but I'm the guy that you said in the beginning where it's like, hey, it's cement in a cake really doesn't taste good, but the point is the cake was made, right? Like, yeah, I'm that guy.
And you have those two polarities, and then people fall in a various spectrum along the road. And then, of course, you've got different doctrinal positions just in Christianity, but you have this same taking place in Hinduism and every other culture. In Islam, you have hyper conservative to be capital C, because it's not necessarily politically conservative, but there tends to be an authoritarian kind of mindset. They've looked a little bit at the cognitive process versus conservative, and this spills over into the religion angle as well. And there are different kinds of people that think differently, and their brains function differently. You tend to find more liberals amongst an atheist environment than you will, although you can find some very politically conservative atheists. And if you look in the creation evolution context, anti-evolutionists are almost exclusively very politically conservative, culture war conservatives, religions. And the number of outliers there is so trivial that you can count them on one hand. So you do find demographics playing a role here. Your flat earthers tend to be hyper conservative. Geocentrists tend to be hyper conservative, and certainly young Earth creationists do.
But this is actually what makes it kind of difficult sometimes. A lot of these flat earthers are smart as hell. Like, to memorize all the flat earth shit, like, you gotta be smart. Like, they're little.
That doesn't take being smart.
I don't think. No, it just takes having.
Yeah.
Like, they be having an answer for all this.
The perfect example.
But
because your dumbass is gonna have dumb answers. It doesn't take a genius to have dumb answers.
But they got it all.
But you look at somebody like Philip Johnson, but he is an intelligent design anti-evolutionist. Got into Harvard when he was 16. Very bright guy. But when you look at how he looks at source material, how he takes a dogma and reinforces it, he suddenly becomes as the worst of the young Earth creationists. In fact, he swallowed hook, line, and sinker Malcolm Bowden's book, who is a geocentrist. And it never dawned on him to check the veracity of that because it said something he wanted to be true. Johnson walked off the gangplank with John Woodmarapp, an Answers in Genesis paper on the reptile-mammal transition. And then David Berlinski quoted Johnson on it. So this ability to parasitize secondary sources that you find in an extreme case with flat earthers is occurring amongst virtually everybody that believes something that isn't true.
I think the issue is, especially when it comes to the Bible, is in order to really understand the Bible, you have to look at Middle Eastern culture in general in that region around that time before, you know what I'm saying? Because, you know, the reason the Bible is written in verses is because these things were, for the most part, sung. It's like a memorization tool. You know, everybody wasn't, you know, they didn't have Google Word and stuff to write stuff down.
Well, it depends on which book of the Bible you're talking about. Because when you get to a lot of more like the narrative type books of the Bible, the chapter and verse reference system was actually added much later. It's just
exactly. Yeah, but
down to the early Catholic Church, the last thing they wanted anybody to do was to read the Bible. This was something that was not considered a general pursuit.
Right. Yeah, no, Slim is
history contradicts that fact. They had translated the Bible into the Vulgate as early as 900, if not earlier.
Right. No, Slim, you're 100% correct. What I was saying is the reason why they decided to when they started splitting them up into chapters and started using the term verse is because they were traditionally like rhyming, like singing wise, because they were oral at first, right? So it's like a mechanism to help remember all these stories by you know what I'm saying? Like you got people that can memorize like 50 songs. Like that's almost a whole book. Like you put a song on and they can like sing all these songs. Why? Because it's like in a rhyming kind of state. It really doesn't translate like that into English, but that's how it is in their thing. So when you understand that these things are written in somewhat of a poetic fashion, is to then try to make everything literal in there, disregarding that fact that a lot of it is written in poetic fashion, and that's how people in the Middle East wrote, that would be doing a disservice to the text. Not to say that, I'm not saying that everything in there is like figurative or metaphor, but you have to throw that caveat in there when looking at it.
No, I'm picking up what you're laying down. I kind of misunderstood you at first, so I'm sorry about that.
No, that's all good. What happened to Steve?
He's here. He's just quiet, muted, I think.
He got kicked out.
No, he just said he was going to be okay for a moment.
No, he's here. He's still here.
He's everywhere.
Omnipresent.
Hey, General.
I've just been AFK, just coming in now and then.
How's everybody's favorite biblical scholar today?
I'm alright.
Ah, nice little graphic up there. Yes. I always like to bear in mind when anyone is talking about religion issues is to lose sight of the fact that whatever religion you believe in, most of the people on earth don't believe it and never have. And so everybody reflects a minority position. Some are very big minorities. Christianity is 2.6 billion at the moment. But even that, it has a huge spectrum of belief between what some Roman Catholic at one end and all the proliferating Protestants, and don't forget the Orthodoxy, which is a different tradition, and your Copts. You've got an awful lot of traditions, and that's just what we have now, because there used to be traditions in the early church before it became the imperial religion.
You know, it's actually funny you mentioned that, because that touches on a gripe I really have with counting numbers in Christianity. Protestants will always seem to be willing to include Catholics when they count the overall numbers, but then when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, they'll exclude Catholics, saying, oh, well, they're not really Christian. Not all Protestants. There's actually a good
In the same way, the Judeo-Christian term, which is a relatively recent one, most Christians of 200 years ago wouldn't have regarded Jews even within the same ballpark. And whether or not this process might have expanded even into a Judeo-Christian Islamic, except with the terrorism matter has aggravated things. But if you lump all of the God of Abraham club together, then you can come up with like 5.2 billion God of Abraham believers, and that's a slight majority of the planet. But given the doctrinal variations amongst all of those groups, whoa, boy, an awful lot of Protestants, especially in young Earth creationism, when you hit that Kent Hovind worldview, and Seventh-day Roman Catholicism as the whore of Babylon in the coming end times, so they're not happy to embrace Pope Francis.
Yeah, when you look at that spectrum of different Abrahamic beliefs, you know what's funny? Satanism is secretly the fourth Abrahamic belief, because Satan isn't, he's not in any other text outside of the Bible, so that would be like the black sheep fourth Abrahamic faith, ironically. But anyway, what I would say is this: the reason why you have all these different denominations and everything now is because back in the day, you still had like the temple system with the priests and the prophets, and this is the 100% exact interpretation because you're getting it right from the source. But after, the Assyrians deporting you, the Babylonians deporting you, the Greek Hellenization period, the Roman occupation, a lot of stuff gets broken up, and then stuff gets included, so now people are trying to, myself included, trying to put puzzle pieces together about what was the original intent of this particular verse.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that too, because even like you can read the Bible and make the mistake that Judaism was very homogenous and there really weren't any schools of thought within it. But when you actually get down into it, I mean, they had many different schools. Like it's referenced throughout the Gospels. There's the Pharisees and the Sadducees, whereas the former accepted a very large biblical canon, held to beliefs like the resurrection of the dead, whereas the Sadducees only accepted the Torah as actual scripture and rejected a lot of other beliefs. That
and you see how those
of the Gentiles.
Yeah, and you see how those denominations start coming about after the fall of the Israelite and Judean kingdoms, like after the Greeks, the Hellenization period, after the Roman occupation. Their prophets are all killed off. The priests with the original intent of knowledge, they're no longer here. So now you got these different groups forming up because the authors of the original texts are gone. So then you now in the New Testament or first century, you got these two, these splinter groups forming.
Yeah, but generally, Second Temple.
You had huge diversity. If you've read the Lost Gospels by Bart Ehrman, is a perfectly fine compilation of a lot of that. In fact, a lot of the people who ended up being burnt as heretics, or rather killed during the persecution of Christians, would have ended up burnt as heretics later on, because a lot of those doctrines, Marcionites and all that, ended up being regarded as heresies. So there was an enormous diversity in early Christianity.
Right.
Yeah, if you actually do a survey on Second Temple Judaism and how that influences the New Testament church, there's actually virtually no contradiction. Temple Judaism is in the whole Jesus ethic and belief. It's only later, like second century onwards, do you get a faction of not only Jews but also Christian, churches and so on. Otherwise, initially they were called the Way.
Yeah,
Christians, they were called the Way. initially.
And that's another thing. It's like there's like this secret little thing that people don't understand. The first Christians were Jews. That's like a thing. It's like when you see like these real hardcore racist kind of people like Klansmen or like the David Duke types, they talk all this shit about Jews and they're terrible, and they're claimed to be Christians. Your Messiah is a Jew. So I don't understand what do they say to make that make sense?
Well, they're trying to co-opt a long tradition of local people. If you come from a place in Germany, for example, or France, where you are a long way ethnically and centuries removed from the original Israelites, but you want to then co-opt that tradition. So cultures have a tendency to want to regard their particular way of doing stuff as the way of doing things. You get a variety of people, particularly in the 18th and 19th century, who start imagining a completely fictitious history. And that's where the Aryan concept, and that they begin to kind of agree in order to make their group to be the true version. So you have the true Israelites that happen to be their bunch. All themselves Jews. And that's where an enormous amount of racism.
So they pull that
it's
trick.
Loony, but boy, people make up loony stuff. I mean, look at the flat earthers.
So I think I seen something where they said like Jesus was an Aryan or something like that. I think I saw this.
Yeah, a lot of that comes from there. A little bit of it comes from Gobineau, who's a French anti-Semite in the 19th century. This was occurring at the time that evolution was starting to come on the scene. So there was a big, hot debate about whether the races were separate species or not. And some anti-evolutionists took the positions they were, and some biblical preachers naturally took a position that there was just a single Southern slaveholders had to figure out what was going on with their rationalization. So the 19th century was busy when it came to wackaloon ideas and people rationalizing their social positions.
Yeah, I think I think religion is at least organized religion. I think it is factually on the decline. I think it's now down to 70% of Americans are Christian. I'm talking about in 2005, it was like 85%. Like that's almost 15% in a little over 10 years. And I don't think necessarily people are becoming less religious. I just think the institutions have turned a lot of people off.
Yeah, the nuns, they can be very spiritual, but not necessarily happy to be in a particular doctrinal setting. And this is becoming more pronounced among the millennials. Whether or not that or not, it's hard to say, because the deep underlying architecture of UG tends towards not necessarily a specific organized religion, but it has some dynamics of its own. So I'm not willing, even though I'm an atheist, I'm not willing to argue, oh gosh, religion's going to wither away. There's been people who've been claiming that for a very long time, and it's still around.
It's going to transform. You know what's crazy? Like, I don't know if y'all watch Planet of the Apes, but you remember that?
Which one? The new version or the old?
The
Charlton
old
Heston.
There was an old, real weird one where you had like these people worshiping nuclear bomb missiles.
Oh, that was in the second film. Yeah, that was the sequel. Remember, the original Planet of the Apes was written by Rod Serling and a few other scriptwriters, and it was social commentary. It was talking about functionally creationism and racism and a whole bunch of deep issues. And so, yes, it's a science fiction story, but it's about us and our prejudices.
And you see, they had that new religion with the nuclear bomb people worshiping the missiles. You know, like it just changed into. Yeah, that was kind of tripped out.
Planet of the Apes, that was the little one, the first sequel.
Yeah. I like these new ape movies, though. They're pretty good. We're not going to talk about that.
They did a very good job of it. They were well written. And they've got a good set. Well, all science fiction that really resonates with us is about us. It's social commentary. It's putting a mirror up to it. That's what H.G. Wells did. He was writing in a time when the Europeans thought they were the center of the universe. And he says, you know, you think you're so good. Let me get you in the time machine and take you up to the year 802,701 and see how creepy it's going to be. You think we're so fabulous, the British Empire? Wait till the Martian war machines come down. And so he was constantly tweaking our sense of smug self-satisfaction to make us think a bit more about where we were going and what decisions we wanted to make, even though Wells himself was personally rather an optimist.
You know, H.G. Wells was a little bit ahead of his time, because in his science fiction novel, he didn't make humanoid aliens, because it's very unlikely, if there is intelligent life, they would look like humanoid, right? So he made like the pictures of these squid looking type creatures, right? So he trying to, it's really, that's like really science fiction where, okay, this is fiction, but let me make a scientifically plausible image of what an alien on this kind of planet would look like. You know?
Well, unlike Jules Verne, wasn't a super techno geek. He was a historian by trade, and actually didn't all the science fiction stories that he wrote early on in his career as kind of irrelevant and didn't really bother, and never called himself a science fiction writer. Verne, by contrast, was always a techno geek, and he would think through everything scientifically and rationally. He never invented a technology. He always came up with extrapolations of existing technology. Wells, the common idea of what life on Mars might be like, it would be differently shaped because it's a lighter gravity. So he figured it would be smaller and they would move around slowly when they got down here. And that's about as far as he went on it. When he wanted to get people to the moon from the Earth, the first man in the moon, he just invented an anti-gravity paint. And Verne had a conniption fit about it. And he says, wait a minute, I sent my people to the moon with gunpowder. So as much as I like H.G. Wells, I got to put a little footnote up there. You know, he was not really much of a techno geek and not super sciencey, although he kept. How many of you are aware of Things to Come, the only film that he wrote?
I thought they made a Man in the Moon movie. Oh, you're talking about an actual movie that he himself wrote.
Things to Come in 1935 was his script. In fact, he co-produced it. And I strongly recommend viewing it. It's a real corker. It didn't do terribly well because it was thought to be a little bit artsy at the time. But boy, it's a fascinating work because the movie came out in 1935. And Arthur C. Clarke remembers vividly when the scene shows the world of 1940, when the German bombers into rubble and everyone's running down into the subways to be protected. The audiences were just roaring with laughter that this idiotic idea of the Germans bombing London in 1940. Well, man. And so he created this super technological civilization that emerges after this decades-long collapse of civilization during the Second World War. And by the time we get to the year 2035, they're living in a world that is now super science. They've got plastics, television sets, they've got flat screen wall screens, and they're figuring out to fly to the moon. And there's now the issue about, should we have, as a public good, doing this exploration of space? And so a story that started out in this 1930s world is now talking about the need of humanity to explore all of the universe. And it's just a mind-boggling story.
Yeah, Ace, but here's a little creepy thing though. That movie, Man on the Moon, they did that was before the moon landing, but how they landed that ship on the moon was almost exactly how they actually landed the ship on the moon in '69. That was 30 years earlier.
Well, the cavosphere from First Man in the Moon just falls. It just bounces off of the moon and rolls to a stop. I don't think the Jules Verne guys actually landed on the moon. They just went around it. But Verne got a lot more of the details correct because he was a techno geek. So he thought you would probably want to launch it from Florida because you'd get an extra push that way. You'd make it out of aluminum, which was the new super metal. of the 19th century. The relative size, the cannon was rather bigger. It was fired by a cannon. Even H.G. Wells made use of a space gun in his story. But there's a whole long tradition of how science fiction writers would get things really wrong. And a lot of the world we came up with in science fiction stories got some of it right. But then again, if you write lots and lots of stories, somebody's going to come up with everything. Very few science fiction writers anticipated the internet. Although Wells had kind of an idea of it, and there was a guy, Murray Leinster, who thought about the idea. But you still found science fiction stories in the 50s where you would have people. One I thought was so hilarious, Robert Heinlein wrote a story about space pirates. And there was a spaceship that was being attacked by the pirates, and the astrogator was trying to figure out their course they were supposed to take, and they had a computer on board the ship, electronic brain. And he was manually typing in the logarithm so that the computer could calculate the orbit. And it literally didn't occur to Heinlein that, excuse me, couldn't you just program that in and not have to plug it in manually? So even Heinlein couldn't quite make the jump, say an Arthur C. Clarke was able to in thinking about what an artificial intelligence might be able to do in 2001.
Right. Like, I'll tell you what, though, the movie that recently, well, I don't know, recently came out like, what, 2 years ago, Interstellar, all physicists are saying that movie had, I mean, it wasn't 100% correct, but that's is closest to a physically correct interpretation of space travel would be like if you went through a wormhole or something. They said that's the closest.
With the caveat of if you can go through a wormhole.
Right. Like the physics of like the black hole and stuff. Like I think Neil deGrasse Tyson actually did a lecture on that movie, and he talked about what they got wrong and what they got right. But even he said that that's the closest he's seen to an accurate depiction of space travel.
Yeah, even what's his name? Phil Plait, the bad astronomer, said that they more or less got that movie right. And he has nothing but unkindness for
filled a lot of slack if it's an interesting and entertaining story. A movie like Planet of the Apes, the first one with Charlton Heston, was so emotionally powerful, even though it's got enough plot holes to drive a truck through if you think about it. But then again, that's not what it's about. You can do all sorts of techno-geeky stuff, but it's why tends to be more resonant with us than Jules Verne, even though Jules Verne was the guy who was paying more attention to the science than H.G. Wells was, because Wells was trying to tell us about ourselves and about our prejudices and about our approach to the future in a way that Verne really didn't care much about. He wasn't good with character development and all that.
No, most of Verne's characters were dry academic types without a...
Yeah.
You couldn't fill a teacup with their personality.
Yeah, I'll plug. I've written a mystery science fiction steampunk retelling of Around the World in 80 Days. So a lot of this issue, and there's H.G. Wells stuff popping up in it as well. That I had to kind of think through a lot of these attitudes and create a much richer character for Aouda, who was a complete doormat in the Around the World in 80 Days story. So I had a lot of fun with that kind of stuff. So I had to think through. What is the function of science and technology in a 19th century context? And I got a bit of the From the Earth to the Moon story in there as well. I had to kind of make an editorial decision about how close I wanted to make it to that preposterous canon thing that's in the original Verne novel.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah, I'll put I'll Amazon one, the print version. It's available for ebooks too. And then, of course, I also got my Evolution Slam Dunk, where I vaporize creationism. Transition. Nobody's ever done that one properly. There we go. I'm right in the middle of the sequel to Paralogs. I love the characters so much, Verne, or Fogg, and Aouda, and Passepartout, and Thomasina Maker, who builds the Kestrel. This is a spoiler alert. There's a craft in there, I call it the Kestrel, made by Maker, who's an ex-slave super genius, and she and Aouda are the two techno geeks in the story. But anyway, if anybody looks closely at the description of the kestrel, it's actually Supercar from the old Puppetoon things that the Jerry Anderson bunch did over in Britain in the 1960s. It's a buried Easter egg moment in there. Slam dunk. I'll put the link up to that too. I might as well plug myself some more.
Well, why not, right?
Yeah. Well, no, that pasted the same bloody thing. Wait a minute. Come on, you little bastard. Boop, 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 boop. Let's try that again. And there we go. Yeah, slam dunk is on the reptile mammal transition. And it hasn't been done properly before. I went through and plugged all the science data in that hadn't been collated. Not even Richard Dawkins paid attention to that stuff. And also went through all anti-evolutionists who shot their mouth off on the reptile mammal transition. So you'll not only be up to speed on the science, but you'll know every possible counter argument that an anti-evolution can make, and you'll be ready on them in response.
That might be handy if I ever hang out with young Earth creationists again.
Oh, not merely the young Earth creationism stuff. The intelligent designers have their head up their ass on the reptile mammal transition. In some respects, worse than the creation scientists, because Duane Gish actually did kind of try to discuss some of the details back in the 1990s, and John Woodmarapp, his stuff at Answers in Genesis, where he tried to go through the cladistic studies, I mean, they fall apart miserably. But the intelligent design gang, Dembski and all the rest, don't get within 100 miles of the data. The paleontologist Christine Janus was particularly delighted, and she loved the section that I did pulling apart Dembski and Wells. You can read her review up on Amazon. She commented on the book.
I'll have to check it out.
An incredible tour de force, she called it, and I'm happy to say, yeah, I can go with that, yeah.
What's the name of it again?
Oh, the Evolution Slam Dunk, Why the Reptile Mammal Transition Proves Macroevolution and How Anti-Evolutionists Ignore It. I put a complicated link up there, which you'll find buried in there. Finally, that's the Amazon.com one. I'll do it just a short, just the text. Because for me, the reptile mammal transition is perfect. It's the slam dunk. It's a macroevolution case that's composed of nothing but microevolution. It's got way more fossil data in it than the bird transition or whales. It's got predicted fossils, probanognaathids. It's got the double jaw joint that were predicted 20 years in advance down to the muscle attachments. So it's got just an amazing data set. And every single anti-evolutionist screws up on it. So what more could you ask?
I'll have to take a look, because I'm more into astronomy than biology, so I can usually talk circles around that.
Yeah, you see, intelligent design doesn't bump into astronomy issues, except they kind of look, oh gosh, the anthropic universe, and that proves God from that point of view. But the paleontology and biology, and that is an equal opportunity annoyance, because it slams into both the young Earth creationists and the intelligent designers as to what the hell do they think was going on with all of these little critters over 100 million years.
Well, to be honest, though, it was actually astronomy that got me to realize that young Earth creationism was wrong.
Oh yeah, yeah. When you start realizing that the moment you have to think about how the hell can we see Andromeda, and how come we see supernovas in Andromeda Galaxy? That if you've got this bit where you've got creation with a parent age, and that's how older creationists certainly kind of played around with it, you can't explain why you're seeing events, because that's what a supernova is. It's a moment in time that is unfolding. And for that to occur in Andromeda Galaxy means that you're creating, I think I described it in Troubles in Paradise book, that it's like you were creating Adam with a navel, also dressed in a frayed business suit with an expired library card in his wallet. There's way too much detail and history going on in there. I'll put my website up there again. You can find a lot of this crap there. Of course, I have a website. Ta-da. been looking at the methodology of creationism, and I've got sections on young Earth creationism because it's still the dominant format. 40%-ish of the American public are young Earth creationists. The new representative from the state of Montana is a young Earth creationist. You've got functionally Ben Carson is a young Earth creationist and a fuddlehead. You've got an awful lot of these people knocking around in the Trump administration, and it ought to give us pause to wonder and be scared.
Yeah, but Carson is a hell of a surgeon.
Oh yeah, never. And that's one of the things that throws a lot of people off, to think the idea that you have to be a blithering idiot who can't keep their shoelaces done to believe something that's really cockamamie not true. No, all you need to do is to have the ability not to think about things you don't want to think about, and your brain is acting like a cognitive sedative, and you can be brilliant. An example who is not a creationist, but he's still a person who doesn't think about things he doesn't want to think about is Noam Chomsky. He's an atheist, an evolutionist, and boy, there are things that you can't get through him for love nor money. He was denying the Cambodian Holocaust in the 1970s, which your jaw drops on that one, and it's a reason why there's a whole chapter on Chomsky in Age of American Unreason by Susan Jacoby, which I strongly recommend. It's an excellent book.
So I never got into Chomsky. I know a lot of people that I followed for a while, celebrities, they all thought Chomsky was the greatest thing.
Well, Lawrence Krauss, he just is a hero worship. He studied under him. And Chomsky's a very bright, temperate guy, never raises his voice. He always seems completely methodical and careful. But boy, you on any subject at all, in 5 minutes he's talking about the military-industrial complex and the oppressed Palestinians. He's got hobby horses that go on in there. He came on my scope because he's the creationists' favorite linguist and evolutionist. They love quoting him because although he is an evolutionist, difficult to figure out what Chomsky thinks went on with the evolution of language. And even today, the most recent book he came out with, co-authored, got raked over the coals by the neuroscientists because they're looking at the neurobiology of how we build language in the brain. And this stuff just wasn't making any sense that was coming out of the Chomsky school. He's proceeding at it from a very rarefied theoretical framework that makes him kind of intractable and annoying. And so I've kind of been keeping an eye on him from that direction. There was a joint appearance that Lawrence Krauss did just, I think, earlier in the year, February or so, with Chomsky. And boy, if there was hero worship, woo, it was on steroids. And I'm just going, oh, no, I can't quite go that far with Chomsky.
Yeah, for sure.
I approached every... Oh, yeah, jump in, yeah.
I mean, you give credit where credit's due. He did pioneer a lot.
Yeah, there is a lot of merit to the idea that there's an intrinsic universal grammar structure, although it's turning out to be a little more complicated than Chomsky thought. And now that we're getting into the neurobiology phase, they've already identified the brain systems that are related to nouns and verbs. The tough part for years, and they're just starting to tease it out, is how do you form grammatical language? The nouns, verbs formed in a direct object and sentences and that kind of stuff. It looks like the natural human language is highly inflected. And that means English and frankly Mandarin Chinese are very mutant languages that are word order language that have mutated away from the standard form. If you're familiar with English and French and Latin and all that stuff, those are inflected languages where they got cases, male and female verbs or nouns and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And we we got rid of that partly accidentally because this also has only been worked out in the last 50 years or so when they realized that we started losing the grammatical system that we inherited from the old German language because English people were intermarrying with Norse a lot. And it turns out that they have almost identical vocabulary, but they have a highly different inflection mode, the same way that English and French have very different inflection modes. And it's hard to communicate that way unless you just junk all of the cases and get rid of all those ridiculous plurals and male, female, and all that kind of stuff. And about the only ones we still got left is like the old thou, which is the counterpart of the German du. and that still lends a little bit. But once we got into the word order language, then it just took off and exploded, and we became the great word thieves. We steal words from other languages, just kleptomaniac. And that's why English language dictionaries are way bigger than everybody else. And we can form these immensely complex sentences that you can't even... are you old enough to remember when you had to diagram sentences in English class?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know that they do that much anymore. But there was a wonderful sentence that semanticists that was kind of a semi-cult bunt, but they made some interesting arguments about the nature of language. Said, try diagramming this sentence in an old style approach. You'd better start thinking about doing something about getting the tire blown up. Now that's a perfectly good English sentence. You know exactly what I mean. But what the hell is the verb in that? And it turns out it's had better start thinking about doing something about it. It's this monstrous complex. And trying to parse it out as to what the verb is, better is being used as a verb in that context. And it doesn't make much sense otherwise. And that's because English as a word order language just takes on this whole new fluid mode. And we start inventing new structures that hadn't existed in languages before. Another thing that came out of the semanticists was that language tends to travel on economic, not political lines. Have you ever seen the old Clockwork Orange?
Yeah. Stanley Kubrick, Malcolm McDowell.
Yeah, yeah. That was reflecting the non-general semanticist view of language, that language merged politically. So that there were a lot of, the thugs that ran around in there had a bunch of Russian words in their language that they were popping up. And this was the theory that Anthony Burgess, who was quite a linguist, was accepting as the modality. Robert Heinlein did stuff like that in his novels as well. Turns out that's not how language runs. Language is economic, not political. You can run a country for centuries and dominate it linguistically because you force people to speak the language, but they will retain their native language. And the moment you're gone, poof, it pops right back up. And it turns out the interesting measure of this was French. Remember that the English kings back in the Robin Hood days didn't speak English, they spoke French. And they were Norsemen, French-speaking Norsemen, the Normans. And they ran for, if you were to go from about 1000 AD all the way down to, yipes, 1400 probably, you would have heard mainly French in court as they were speaking French as their dominant language. The locals spoke English, or what would later become English after it mutated with the Norse. But words from France started to creep in, not while it was being run by French-speaking kings and French-speaking bureaucrats, but in the 14th century when the English started to trade extensively with the French. Now the words are passing. You want to see what a dominant language is? It's the one everybody copies because it's the dominant economic system. And at the moment, it's American English, not English English, not British English. And so you would find in Germany, they would be saying, dort liegt ein Hippie, trinkt ein Coca-Cola. Because that's the way the language is moving. It's moving on economic lines. And word police just can't stand it. The French have an official department of the Académie Française that goes around every once in a while trying to remove all of the foreign words from the language, and doesn't work.
They have to go back a long time to purify the French language.
Oh yeah, well the Germans tried it too. They wanted to purely Aryanize the language, and one of the words that was French in there was Nase, which means nose. And I think they came up with a word that, in German, that meant orifice in the face for intaking air or something like that. It never caught on. I think even if the Nazis had remained in power, heaven forbid, it still wouldn't have caught on.
That strikes me as like some of the more left field ideas that came out of the Enlightenment.
In particular, the French Revolution. Remember, they tried to reorganize everything. They had a 10-month calendar, a decimal calendar. They had the month of Thermidor and all of that. The only thing that survived was the decimal monetary system. And of course, they lopped people's heads off, and they were a bunch of extreme firstborn ideologues, Robespierre and all the rest. They were in their early 20s. Their testosterone was through the roof. Yeah, it's a fascinating case. That I would say that's one of the first big cultures in the modern world where Tortukans, these turtle minds that creationists represent, got in charge. The Nazis, you find in the Soviet Union, you got them in North Korea today. We have one as president of the United States currently. Yipes.
Yeah, I had a teacher in high school who took a very dim view of much of what happened in the Enlightenment. So I got an interesting take on it when I was growing up.
It was a mixed bag. You had there was an enormous pro-science bit, particularly in the early 19th century amongst writers. It was a time when to be a really good writer in the early 19th century, you loved not only the arts, but boy, you just loved science. And so there was a kind of a techno geek bit that you found in, I'm trying to think of some of the writers and poets in the early 19th century. In a way, it was reflected in Frankenstein and Shelley, where they were talking about the latest in what was deemed the science of the time, and maybe creating life artificially, and that turns into the Frankenstein story, always with a little bit of spin.
That's even in my favorite poem, Coleridge, Rime of the Ancient Mariner.
Bingo, yeah, and you get a bit of a reaction as you move later into the 19th century. And only really in the 20th century, if you're familiar with C.P. Snow, Two Cultures and a Second Look.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, it's seminal. He was arguing, he was a chemist, I think, by trade, but he also loved the arts. And he said, you know, that the idea that a scientist wouldn't know diddly about Shakespeare, or somebody who loves Shakespeare wouldn't know diddly about science in the college environment wasn't a good thing. That he really wanted to encourage the idea that it's part of the universal heritage of knowledge, and you need to be familiar with both and love both. And so that cultural divide, we see it popping up every once in a while, where you have a tendency to be over compartmentalized in a discipline group. So yeah, C.P. Snow, Two Cultures and a Second Look. I suppose I should put that up there. It came out, I think, in the 50s or early 60s. C.P. Snow, Two Cultures and a Second Look.
Well, you see that a lot today too, where like a lot of scientists will remain ignorant of a lot of metaphysics, and vice versa.
Yeah. Whereas I've always been interested. And I take the attitude, of course, now it's kind of not politically correct to expropriate other cultures, but I'm saying no, any clever idea that anybody ever thinks in the history of the universe, anywhere, even by non-humans, is the common property of all sentient beings, and the good ideas should be adopted and used and embraced, and art and science and all the rest. And any stupid idea, no matter how long it's been practiced, is one that you just toss off like an old coat, even though you may reflect on the history of it and how it affected stuff. And it doesn't depend on how long it is or whether or not it's been done. If it's been the tradition to bang your head with a ball-peen hammer for 100 years, no, stop that. It's not a good idea.
Well, sounds like a nice idea, but I don't think we'll ever get rid of taxes.
Oh no, and one of the silly ideas that pops up once in a while when you talk with people on economics is the idea you don't want to use the tax code for social purposes. I'm sorry, it automatically does that. It doesn't matter whether it's a matter of do you do social purposes that you think are a good idea or not. If you have a system where, for example, the only people that are taxed are working people and aristocrats and churches aren't, that's what you get the French Revolution to do. That's why you get enormous inequality that way. I'm in favor of a mildly progressive income tax. I would love to see a mildly progressive Social Security tax. That would also be a good idea. You don't want your tax rates to go too high. The Laffer curve is kind of a shorthand version, but it still has a basic grain of truth to it. That put your rates up too high, and you end up being counterproductive. The reason why the Beatles moved to America is because the tax rates in Britain were so ridiculously high that they couldn't make any money that way. It was, they were taking like 99% of their income, no matter what they did. So they just moved to America. We had a tax rate that was very high theoretically in the Eisenhower years. You had, I think, 85, 88% income tax rate at the higher level, something like that. But nobody paid that because that's why you had tax lawyers. So there's an element that you get where your tax rate ends up not being effectively done because you have an overly complicated tax system where people figure out how to evade taxes. Put your tax rate up too high and people find ways of not having income. You find ways of having company cars and company houses that don't fall under the income rule. And then you spend too much time figuring out how to avoid taxes and not enough time doing stuff. So there are natural rules you have to think about on that to see. You want it simple but fair. Duh.
Hey, James. I think that Slim was saying. I think that Slim was saying that taxes are a bad idea altogether. So here's the problem where you say we should get rid of stupid ideas, whereas Slim would say we don't need taxes, and you would say yes. Who would be the arbiter of what is a stupid idea and what is not?
That's an interesting
excellent question. Yeah, bingo. Partly that's a political issue, and that's why you have elections and you have people talking about stuff. Partly it's a matter of historical discussion. It isn't as though things like this haven't been tried before. One of the things that's so boring about so much of the political debate is how much of it we've already gone over if people only looked at the history. The issues about protectionism, the issue about the tax code. Some of the people in the Cato Institute types, and I think Ben Carson is one who has said that we should have like excise taxes to fund the government. Well, we performed that experiment. It's called the 19th century. How did you think the government made its money before the income tax? They used excises. It was a very small government. They didn't have enough money to do anything. If there was a depression that came along, basically you were on your own. And it was not nirvana on earth. When you have a decision to do income taxes, it was because this was thought a good way to compensate for the fact that you had an enormous income disparity. And you got up to a rather bad income disparity in the 1920s, just before the crash, and we're now up to the same level of income disparity now, which is not a good idea. Discussions of the trade policy and protectionism that we seem to go around the same race course over again. We got years of global tradition on how free trade does or doesn't work. And the alternatives to free trade are worse than the disease.
What was it Churchill said? Capitalism is the worst system.
Well, he was talking about democracy there, but
yeah,
you could apply it to capitalism too. Yeah, yeah. There's
democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, yeah. And there's right to it, because if you look at the downsides of not following those basic precepts, it doesn't work well. The idea that planned economies can resolve issues, whether you're being on the right wing or the left wing or whatever. Some of the bits with, I'm still quite a bit of a Milton Friedmanite, in the sense that an awful lot of economic systems that are desirable are ones where you don't have to micromanage, because you can't micromanage them. Nobody can figure out how to pull the little levers on the economy because it's a nonlinear system. And the moment you think you can, that you can just adjust something up or down like you're speeding up on the car, you've lost. You've made a dumb mistake, because nonlinear systems have interactive effects that you can't anticipate until you've already made the mistake. But
yeah, I can't remember if it was either Friedman or if it was Thomas Sowell who said that a planet, nobody has access to the amount of information needed to run the economy.
Yeah. And this was part of the problem that you found in Marxist planned economies, because they think that they're not merely trying to simply redistribute what has already come about. It's they don't even do a good job of doing that typically. They're terrible on that. But the premise on the other side, on the capitalist side, there's an unfortunate little premise knocking around in a lot of GOP politics on here, and it's the idea that the only way that you can make money in a market economy is by coming up with clever new inventions and hiring people. Now, you don't want economic restrictions that prevent that from happening. And we know Bill Gates or Henry Ford or other people created products and made gigantic industries and changed the world because of that. But it's also possible, especially if you have inherited wealth, to make a big fortune bigger by buying out your competitors and throwing 20,000 people out of work. The Vanderbilt fortune is a perfectly fine illustration of it. Vanderbilt was dirt poor back in the early 19th century, absolute poverty-stricken guy from Staten Island, I think. And he got into the shipping business in the early days of steam. And a lot of the things he did were not OSHA friendly. The steamboats would blow up, and there was a lot of rapacious business going on. But anyway, he made quite a lot of money in the 1820s, 30s, 40s, and made a little bit more money during the Civil War, supplying the Union Army and a few things. After the war, he was already quite old. He was pushing 70 or so, and he decided to go into the railroad business. And he decided to build the New York Central Railroad. This he did not do by building railroad. He did not build track. His plan was to buy all the railroads between New York and Chicago and create this unified system. And there is a certain logic to a centralized system where you eliminated a lot of the competing lines and were able to handle things more efficiently. Pennsylvania Railroad came about through the same kind of a process. He ended up dying in the 1870s with his, I think he had about 50 or I think it was $60 million, which was a billionaire by the cost of the time. Now the kid, William Henry, took that money and through savvy real estate deals and buying slums and all sorts of wonderful things, parlayed that into $200 million. So the big Vanderbilt fortune was made by the kid, not the guy that built the railroad by not building railroads. And then it was the grandchildren who spent all the money buying lavish mansions and getting married off to impoverished counts and generally screwing themselves up. Now, the Vanderbilts aren't impoverished, but they ain't the movers and shakers that they were in 1880. And so there's a good argument to be made that a better way to recycle great fortunes is to have profligate grandchildren.
That's a fair argument.
No, we have the income tax came in originally. It was like 1 or 2%, and it was only on the top people. But eventually, it reached the stage where, spurred on by the First World War and again by the Second World War, the only way that you can do a government that actually does really big things, like send people into space and build aircraft carriers that powered by atomic energy, is to have enough money to work around with. But then you also think through the social safety net issues that came about, particularly in the 20th century. And the model that some people like to point to is Sweden. 85% of Sweden's means of production are owned privately. It's a capitalist country. But it's got a social safety net, and its income distribution is one that everybody agrees is a good one. Conservatives, if you put up the charts, they'll home in on the Swedish income.
Sweden have a basic income?
Sure. I'm not sure if they do or not. They probably do have because of their social safety net. But the income distribution in Sweden has the upper income group having like 5, 10, 15% or so. In other words, it's a chunk of money. But nonetheless, it's not the kind of skewed banana republic one that we have in the United States, where like the top 1% have like 30 or 40% of the income and the top 5% have over half. And that's a potentially economically dangerous thing, because the big drivers of economic development are the people in the middle class and working class people becoming middle class. And when you shut that down by having stuff becoming congealed up at the top, rich people can find ways of making extra money without necessarily making innovation.
All right,
and we've seen that. Yeah,
I'm gonna have to be wrapping this up. I'm fading. And
okay.
I can't let it go. I can't let people in for we already have one troll, but yeah. So
I was dithering on about the history of economics.
No, nobody has mod control because it's not that type of hangout, so I can't just pass mods to give it out. So I'm gonna have to call it a night, guys. But I just wanted to show that I did get a webcam, so hopefully I can integrate that into my programming a little bit.
You mean we won't get to see moderator on duty anymore? I'm disappointed.
Yeah, moderator's going off duty. I'm finishing watching Doctor Who, and then I'm going to pass out because I'm.
Oh, which Doctor Who?
Season 10, episode 7. One with the it's got a pyramid in it. I don't remember the name of it.
The only British sci-fi you need to be watching is Red Dwarf.
I'm not a.
Red Dwarf is fun too. Smeg heads.
I'm not a big fan of this.
That's I've always liked that.
I'm not a big fan of this new companion. I mean, Bill. I mean, she's okay, but it's just I'm not a big fan of Peter Capaldi either as a doctor. I mean, this is like my least favorite season of it, but.
I'm an old fart, so I can appreciate Peter Capaldi. I like the fact that they had an older doctor for a change in there. Although I still love Tom Baker.
Yeah, Tom Baker was my
It's
doctor.
usually whoever is the first doctor you actually watched is the one you tend to identify with that. And so for me, it was Tom Baker.
Mine too. Well, Tom Baker also did it for 7 years too. He did longer than anybody.
Yeah, He went from bricklayer, literally, to Doctor Who hero. And I think he just died recently. Either that or he's in fairly bad health.
But Peter Capaldi's leaving after this season, so they're already ready to replace him. I mean, he did.
I think the tendency is that they're very grueling to do now because they're basically done at the level of a movie.
Oh yeah.
Because we've now moved to high definition, so everything is done with high production quality, and it's a grueling thing to do. And plus, the scripts are better. They really got some really meaty material. It isn't like the kind of kids show that it started out 60 years ago.
Stephen Moffat and Neil Gaiman and a few other people, but Stephen Moffat's leaving. But anyways, thanks for listening, guys. Travis, Gordy, or Gordo. Hope you're feeling better, Gordo. By the way, Thalo Blue, Calzador, Apologia, and everybody in here. I'm going to bed, so. Good
okay.
Thank you, James, for that.
Well, you can call me RJ. That will be consistent with the thing over there. That way, they'll all know he is the same organism.
That's fine, RJ. But yeah, definitely, people were paying attention to that for quite some time. So, anyways, good night.
I may be annoying, but I try not to be boring.
Never boring.